The seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Don't back down, double down. Don't back down, double down.
Oh, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday night. You know what that means? It's time to go time travelling again on the Bustalgia World Tour here on the Boise bus, and we are going back to 2003, 2004 as Martin and Neil month continues. Obviously, last week it was quite a big one. Well, every Martin and Neil show so far has been a big one, but of course, the last season we dealt with was the Seville season. So Celtic, obviously, they finished without a trophy to their name the season before, despite their exploits, the heroic exploits to get to the UEFA Cup Final. But now they're coming back with a vengeance in the 03-04 season. It is going to be a good one. But as you can see tonight, Russell Boyce, who's been an ever-present on Martin and Neil month, unfortunately, we conflict schedule problem tonight. He's with a concert tonight, basically. He's at a gig. So, but don't worry, we have got another Boyce on the bus. It is Jonathan Boyce stepping in. 2 in a row, Jonathan. Welcome back aboard, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. This season's a bit more enjoyable than last in some ways. You know, there's at least some highlights, some trophies to take away from this one, Phil. It was a simple case, I think, this season of don't poke the bear. Not sure how appropriate that saying is now I think about it, because the Bears are really the ones across the city. But you know what I mean. Don't poke Martin O'Neill's team, because they will bite back, and they certainly do this season.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of angry Bears on the other side of the city at the end of this coming season, because, we come roaring back for a vengeance. And Liam, Canada's favourite Tim, how are you doing today, mate? Looking very dapper as well, man. Made an effort for Henrik's last season.
I do this when I'm working, you know, so...
I love it, mate.
Still the middle of the day for me. I love this season. You're right, you poked the bear. You know, for everything we put into last season, all the emotion, I think this was a payback. You know, that's a good team. You could tell that they were pace up to pay us back. And it was an unbelievable season, most enjoyable. All the big games were big games.
Oh, aye. The green and whitewash to come. And, it's Henrik's last season. That is it's going to be it was a sore one to take, but what a way to go out. But yeah, we will be diving into that all very, very soon. And folks, of course, as I am tonight, the designated driver, once again, I'll remind everybody to do all the good stuff that I like to talk about. So yes, remember to, of course, subscribe if you're new to the channel and you like the content we put out. Then Boise Bus, we try and go 7 days a week at the moment. Just depends. Celtic are playing at the moment. It's midweek games, weekend games. We've got our PMP, we've got the Thursday Night Forum, Regan's Sunday Blair, the Monday Club, Bustalgia. We've got a bookie bashing show. Yeah, we've got enough content to fill 7 days a week. So if that's right up your alley, then hit that subscribe button. Of course, if you hit the like button, that is a massive, massive help because, again, YouTube loves interaction. So, yeah, your like is always appreciated if you enjoy what you watch tonight. Of course, always get involved in our comment section on the right-hand side of your screens. It was a lively one last night, I could tell you, in the TNF. That was certainly good. But, hey, we welcome debate on the bus. We love all of that. So please get involved. And, of course, tonight, if you've got any fond memories of the 0304 season, drop them in there. We want to hear about it as well. Tell us your favourite Henrik Larsson moments because, you know, he's very, very topical tonight. And, of course, the final thing to do is social media. If you wish to share the link, Twitter, Facebook, and all that other jazz, then, yeah, it would be much appreciated. Spreads the word of the bus. And, yeah, if you want to also become a Boise Bus member, you can do so as well. But don't worry, folks, all of our content will always be free. It will be behind a paywall or on Patreon or anything. It's just sort of a doff of the cap, as I always say, to Russell for his hard work that he's put in on the channel. So, yeah, guys, we shall get started. But first things first, we shall do some trivia, as we always do on the Boise Bus.
Yes, like a bit of trivia.
Yeah. Trivia question tonight relating to a little something that happened this season. Because again, as I'm reading my notes, I'm always trying to think what's a question, what's a topic I can use, and this one hit me because I totally forgot about this one. Right, so in the summer of 2003, which is obviously what we're going to be talking about, Stephen Craney joined a very exclusive club when he moved from Celtic to Southampton. But can you name all the players who have moved between both clubs in either direction? There are 9 others in the history between Celtic and Southampton. 9.
Does it include loan deals?
Yes,
any sort of deal.
Loan deal, any deal between both ways. So going both ways, Southampton to Celtic, Celtic to Southampton. It's more skewed in favour of going to Southampton, I'll say that right now. But there is a few that I'd completely forgot about that came to us as well. So, yeah, it's all that. But Stephen Craney joined that unique club. We've almost got enough to do a starting 11 of players that have played for Celtic and Southampton. We've got 10 at the moment in the history. So, yeah, that's tonight's question. It's all about that one. So yeah, 9 other players I'm looking for, and it's the earliest one is actually from the late 80s. But it's a player that I think Liam, you'll have heard of this guy because we've mentioned him before on Bustalgia. I'll say that his name's came up before, but yeah, and then after that it's late 90s onwards. So it's a bit more easier to get them. But the earliest one is going to be a bit of an obscure one. So Liam, we're needing you to come through on that one, mate. You come through, mate.
I've got 3 of the more recent ones, Liam. So if you can get that late one, then we're in business.
Yes, indeed. So, guys, we shall crack on then. We'll start talking about the 03-04 season. Celtic coming roaring back after the disappointment of the Seville season. If you could call it a disappointment. It's a strange one when you think back on it. There's so many fond memories of the stuff we achieved. But ultimately, there's nothing to show for it at the end. But most Celtic fans, as we said last week, they wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It was phenomenal, a hell of a ride. But yeah, we now continue on. 2003-2004, so summer of 2003, and as usual, got to start with the football winners of where we were that summer. So Champions League was a rather drab final, an all-Italian final. AC Milan and Juventus had a pretty dire 0-0 draw at Old Trafford, which AC Milan won on penalties. And then, of course, UEFA Cup Final, we discussed last week. It was, of course, Porto beating us in the final. That, of course, is a bit of a sore one. In England, Manchester United wrestled back the title from Arsenal. However, the Gunners are gearing up for something rather special this coming season. The FA Cup, though, Arsenal did pick up the FA Cup as a sort of consolation in 2003. They beat Gordon Strachan Southampton 1-0 in the final in Cardiff, with Perez scoring the winner. And as for the English League Cup, Liverpool defeated Man United 2-0 in Cardiff with goals for Steven Gerrard and Michael Owen. And of course, as we mentioned last week, even though it was only like very briefly at the end of the show, we covered like the sort of wrap up to the domestic season. Rangers won all the domestic trophies in the 2002-2003 season, won the treble. Of course, particular sore one for the League Cup final for us. We had a John Hartson goal wrongly disallowed for offside, and he also missed a penalty as well. An eventful day for Big Bad John. And of course, guys, that conclusion to the league season. So we never got much time to talk about it last week, but yeah, it was when I was doing the notes for it last week. It was such a back and forth one where it was like we scored, they scored. I think Dunfermline were actually level at one point at Ibrox as well, even though they lost 6 in the end.
I think they were winning.
They were winning it, but it was back and forth for the goals. We'd score, they'd score. It keep going and going, but it all comes down to the Alan Thompson penalty. He misses a penalty with about 10 minutes to go, which would have put us 5-0 up. which would have won us the league. And I think Russell said last week that even if he'd scored that and it all stayed, if Rangers still won 6-1, we would have won the league. It turns out we wouldn't have, because Rangers got that 6th goal, and that would have actually beat us the title, even if we scored, because going into the day, we were tied on the same points, the same goal difference, but then it would go to goals scored. And if we'd won by 5 goals and they won by 5 goals, and incredibly, despite in the 03 season, where Larsson, Hartson and Sutton between them scored about 80 goals, somehow Rangers had a higher goals for going into that last game. I was stunned at that one, because I always had it in my head as well that if Thompson had scored that penalty, we'd have won the title. When I looked at the league table, they had better goals scored. I was like, oh man, no way.
We needed that to go in, and we needed the one that hit the post, I think, from Petrov, perhaps it was, to go in as well. There's, it's very easy to remember the misses now, though, isn't it?
And Gordon Marshall was being a bit of a bam, if I remember right, and that's not the first time. Well, he comes back to haunt us again at the end of the next season, because he's in goal for Motherwell in the end of the 05 season, and he was scoring in goal for Kilmarnock there at the end of the 03 season, and he's messing about well, in 4-0 and stuff like that, and he's time wasting. It's like,
I remember that from one of the, I think it was the Celtic history DVD. They get Martin O'Neill on that particular game, and they talk about it, and he's just going on. It's extraordinary how many times the Kilmarnock players are putting the balls into the stands, not wanting it returned into play quickly. The ball boys were slowing things down when they're 4-0 down. Martin O'Neill's like, I've never seen anything like this before in my life, and it was a very baffling day. I don't know what Kilmarnock's game plan was there. Clearly, it was just to make sure the title ended up at Ibrox by any means necessary, and just trying to keep their scoreline as low as possible, rather than trying to make a fist of it for their own fans. But it was a crazy day, that one. It's one that I don't think any Celtic fans ever going to forget. And I would also say it's probably a league final campaign, final day of the season you'll never see again, where it's a proper shootout like that. Generally speaking, it usually comes down to points, and I doubt you'll ever see one that goes right to the wire and goal difference like that ever again. And typically, Celtic being Celtic are on the wrong end the one time it does happen.
Oh, of course. And as I said earlier on, Liam, it was don't make them angry. And I say, well, what happened that day? Because after the game, of course, Chris Sutton, he was quite vocal, as he normally is, about Dunfermline and how they played that day, and it resulted in a bit of a war of words between the Dunfermline chairman, John Yorkston, and Chris Sutton, because he didn't mince his words, did he, Liam? What he said?
No. He went both barrels, right? Just calling it as it is. You could see right there, that was a preview of what Chris Sutton was going to be like as a journalist or a TV pundit. He just went for the throat, and I think he had every right to as well. I mean, you look back at that season as well, like the COVID season, and maybe just the last one as well. The amount of penalties Rangers had that year was insane.
Yes,
it was unbelievable. Yes. Every week there was a penalty. And also that season as well, I think that gives us permission to get, aggravated when we see some of these refereeing decisions where we're up, on goal average, or we're beating a team 4-5-0, and we're going for that final goal, and then they just decide to chop off the injury time and so we've seen how that, that extra goal, will help us at the end of the season, because we have been stung like that. And so I think every goal counts, and when we get ripped off, with time and that, where we could end up scoring another goal, there's a reason that we're more aware of that now, because that's how we lost the league.
Yeah, I think there's a brilliant game I remember in the run-in to this as well, where Rangers went to Dens Park with the second or third last game of the season, and they get 3 penalties. If you remember, they were going to lose or draw that game. I think they went at 3-2 in the end. Barry Ferguson misses twice from the penalty spot, and then Arteta actually gets put on penalties, and that's why Arteta hits the penalty on the final days, because Ferguson's off them. Arteta goes on them, and it's because of the game at Dens Park. Arteta scores with about 5 minutes left at the third time of asking when the referee's giving them a penalty. And I remember my dad was absolutely livid. He was trying to do a Mark Kearney. He was trying to get on Clyde after the game. It was probably for the best that he didn't, because the amount of expletives that would have been coming out of his mouth, we'd have probably quite quickly kicked off the air. But I always remember that game.
When you said it there, that one's come to my head as we began to talk about it. I had a vision in my head of Dens Park. I can remember there was missed penalties and everything, and they kept getting a penalty. It was like, keep awarding them one till they score. Oh my God! So yeah, they talk about us being bad. But look at some of the mad decisions, and yeah, that probably explains why they had a better goal scored over the piece of the season. I think Barry Ferguson scored an obscene amount of goals. They were all for the penalty spot, a bit like the current captain. When I think about it, scores a lot for the penalty spot as well. But it was so it just ended up being the sort of fuel on the flame for this coming season, because it did provokes a wee bit. And funny enough, because sometimes I look at the way the fixtures come out, and sometimes I think there's a bit of an angle with it, because we start this season with a game against Dunfermline, and it's like, that's a bit convenient, isn't it? We're sent to East End Park on the very first game of the season after all the war of words between both teams. And there's been other instances over the years where the way the season's ended, and then the way the next season starts, you're like, it's too convenient that they two teams have been put together after what happened the season before. So, it's I think they were at it with that one. They were looking for a box office headline by putting us up against Dunfermline. And if I remember correctly, we draw 0-0 on the first day of this coming season, and Dunfermline were pretty happy about it. They were pretty pleased with themselves, but it was a perfect bookend to see. We started the season against Dunfermline, and we ended our season against Dunfermline in the Cup Final, which we'll get to. Because what a day that was. And just a quick one I was going to say about a comment that came up from, if I can find it, from Chris. He was asking what's happening when the World Cup is on, Phil, because obviously Bustalgia, I do every Friday night. I did say when the World Cup starts, I might go back and finish off the World Cups and Euros that I've not done yet. But I've got another idea up my sleeve, basically, that I'm going to speak to Russell about, something else that we could maybe do on a Friday night. But we've still got a bit of time to play with that idea. So, was it end of November it starts the World Cup?
Yeah, it's around the end of November, and it runs to the middle of December, does it not? I think they've tried to rush it in as much as they can. I think this World Cup's getting played over a shorter period of time than it normally would when it falls in the summer, but it's something like another three and a half week break probably still. So it's a bit inconvenient, and it's not one that I can honestly say I'm looking forward to at all. It's probably the least interested I've been in the World Cup ever when they've shoved it in the middle of a season, but that's a totally different story, and I'm sure FIFA have been paid handsomely for organising it this way.
Yes, they have indeed. But yeah, I've got something up my sleeve that I might I'll speak to Russell about, and if we don't do that, then Bustalgia will just continue, I guess. I might go back and finish off the remaining World Cups, but unfortunately, the next one I've got to start with is the 2010 World Cup. I need to talk about Vuvuzelas in Spain, strangle-holding people off the park with a passing game. It's like, I can't be bothered talking about that. But anyway, I might need to just bite the bullet and do it. But I'll keep your eyes peeled, Chris, and we'll see what I come up with anyway. And also Sean Barlow coming here and saying, Rangers getting 3 penalties, not a fucking chance. He's making that up. Well, definitely not. I swear to God, it happened.
YouTube it, it'll be there. It'll be there, Sean. If you go onto YouTube it, Dundee versus Rangers 2003, you'll find it, mate. And they're probably none of them are penalties as well, I bet.
Yeah, it definitely happened. We were there. We lived through it, sadly. Still got post-traumatic stress disorder about it. But I'll quickly just wrap up the other major leagues across Europe for who won what. Of course, in Italy, it was Juventus again. In Spain, it was Real Madrid. Germany, Bayern Munich. No surprises with A3 at all. In France, it was Lyon, because this is Paul Gred's Lyon side that won about 7 in a row, I think. Portugal, it was Porto. Of course it was. And in Holland, it was PSV Eindhoven. Now, of course, Russell isn't here to obviously correct me with the prices, but again, just a disclaimer for I read them out in case you're new. Yes, I am aware that these transfer fees are a bit skewed because for some reason, the website transfer market, despite having the most comprehensive database of transfers in world football history, this is the place to go. They decided to put inflation on the prices of what it would cost in modern day football. I'm like, why are you doing this? So I can only really go by that. I could sit and try and work it out with a calculator and use Google and try and figure it out, but I don't have time for that. So I'm just going to go with it. I can tell you this, the 10 players are in the correct order, but the prices that they've got next to them, we've got 2022 prices next to it. And funny enough, there is a team that is all over this top 10, and there's a very good reason why. So number 10 is actually Cristiano Ronaldo going from Sporting to Man United. 2022 price would be 17 million for that one. Not a bad buy. Even in 2022, that's no bad for Cristiano Ronaldo.
You can probably sell that as actually being what they paid into us and for if people didn't know, and you'd think that was that's still a steal.
Oh, definitely. And what he would go on to become, Jesus Christ, man, what a player. I remember his first season, though. He turned out he took Beckham's place and took Beckham's number. He turns up all these fancy step overs, and he's got like the blonde highlights in his hair. And there was just a lot of guys in the Premier League, like the old school minded defenders that just weren't having it. The amount of times he would just get chopped down every time he was trying to dribble past people, they're like, "No today, son. Not in the mood for it." They would just go right through him. Oh, he was battered black and blue during that first season for Man United. Now,
probably helped make him, though, Phil, I'm sure. It probably helped make him.
Yeah, probably did. Toughened them up, definitely. Now, number 9 is the first of the team that I was talking about. It's all over this. It's Adrian Mutu going from Parma to Chelsea for 17.1 million. Roy Mackay, who, of course, is about to play a part in our season. It's interesting. Every time I seem like I do the top 10, I always feel like I come across a player and I go, this player's about to play a part in our season. But yeah, Roy Mackay went from Deportivo La Coruña to Bayern Munich for 17.7 million. Claude Makélélé from Real Madrid to Chelsea, 18 million. Sebastian Frey from Inter Milan to Parma for 18.9 million. Juan Sebastian Veron, Man United to Chelsea, 19.6 million. Damien Duff, Blackburn, again to Chelsea, 22 million. Hernan Crespo, Inter to Chelsea, 23.4 million. Ronaldinho, PSG to Barcelona, 29 million. And the number
another
one
with cross pass this.
Yeah, another one in this coming season, yes, because the UEFA Cup tie. Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Aye. And of course, the number one most expensive transfer in the summer of 2003. It was a big one at the time, controversial because a big falling out at Old Trafford. David Beckham became the latest Galactico, going to Real Madrid, 33.7 million in modern day money. But it seems like Chelsea might have had a takeover, and that's quite topical because last night, obviously, myself, Mark, and Russell, we were in the trenches last night and on the TNF talking about this idea that's been floated around. It could just be clickbait. It's a good chance it is, because whenever these headlines come around, it usually doesn't amount to anything. But also, a few newspapers were running the story that the European Super League might be back on in some sort of format. Celtic and Rangers might be sounded out, and there's a lot of debate back and forth about the ethics of it and morals behind it and owners and so forth. Because we didn't say at any point if this happened and Celtic somehow joined it, it's not necessarily a case that we would be bought over by some evil Russian oil baron or something. It's like it could still be the same board that could run the club. We just have access to more money. But yeah, this is of course the first season here in these shores that we saw a foreign owner come in and take over a team. And Jesus Christ, did Roman Abramovich certainly stamp his authority getting the checkbook out that summer, because absurd just going through that top 10 there, and they're all over it like a rash, the players that they were buying. It was just like throwing money here, there and everywhere, because it's Claudio Ranieri that's still the manager this season. It's not Mourinho yet. He's still a season away. But Jonathan, you'll remember a lot of this stuff with the Chelsea takeover.
Yeah, I do. It was quite new at the time, and you were thinking, hang on, wait a minute, they're trying to buy the Premiership. It was kind of like you were beginning to realise that for me growing up, it was always Man United and Arsenal were the two that were tussling for the title down south. That was always the two you could put your house on. That was going to be between the one or the other. And I was probably a bit too young when Blackburn managed to win it in the 90s. So it was always them. You could kind of feel the momentum was growing with Chelsea, that something big was happening there when they start signing all these top players. And they have a few misses, though, in that sort of list. I can't remember Veron being particularly successful. Hernan Crespo, I don't think did particularly well either from memory. So there was a few misses. I don't remember how successful Mutu was. He was out to fail a drugs test or something, did he not?
Yep. Drugs test.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so there was quite a few misses in there, and it was maybe just a case that with Ranieri, he maybe wasn't the best manager in place, perhaps, to get the good ones. And I mean, Damien Duff certainly proved to be a good buy out of that list you've reeled off there. But I think the real sort of business happens with them next season. I mean, what did you kind of make of all of that? Because that's quite a lot of money was getting spent around that, and it was fairly new for all of us, kind of seeing something like that happen, wasn't it?
It's funny, the year before it was all, we've been doing this bust, especially the Martin O'Neill years, when Phil's been doing the transfers. Like 7 out of 10 have all been Italian teams.
Yes.
This is the first time we've seen. Only Parma, I think, was the only one that was actively, trading off players and that. And I think Parma had like a serious decline after that year. They've never recovered since. And I think you were seeing the switch now of the money moving from Italy into England.
Yep.
The English players were starting to play money, and Chelsea played a big part in that. And I remember that came out. I had a friend that supported Chelsea, and he'd supported them since he was a kid. But oh my God, they came out of the woodwork that year. and they were,
Aye.
you know, like they seemed to be like the international team, like living over in Canada. It was if Chelsea were playing in the pub, it was people from all over the world were watching Chelsea, and I never knew that they had that sort of resonance before. Like I'd never seen Chelsea as a big team like us, you know.
Yeah, they were always a cup team. Well, for what I knew when I was growing up, they were in the mid-90s. They began basically winning cups, FA Cups and League Cups, but the league title, they were always a bit far off. Because for me, the Premier League, the peak Premier League. I mean, I don't hate the Premier League to the level a lot of fans do, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I feel that still the peak of the English Premier League was when Arsenal and Man United were going at it in the late 90s, early 2000s. That Wenger Arsenal team and Ferguson's Man United team, some of the battles between them, like Roy Keane and Vieira and stuff like that in the middle, was proper. Like, you know, they were good players, but they were also shithousers as well. All of them, every single player on the park, they could pure mix it up. It wasn't this going down and feigning injury for 5 minutes and stuff like that. So it was like, you know, real blood and guts matches. But then Chelsea completely changed it when they got that takeover, and then Mourinho comes in a year later. He completely changes the game, and that's when, you know, Arsenal, you know, the 04 season's Arsenal's last title. But it seems like Wenger just couldn't live with Mourinho for so long. He went a long time before he finally got a win over him. I think it was in maybe Mourinho's second spell as Chelsea manager they finally got a win over him, and that was in 2014. So he had a massive hoodoo over him. But also regarding Chelsea, you're saying, Jonathan, about some of the hits there. Like, I think it was myself and Mark were on doing a Monday club, and we were talking about the Leipzig game, and we were talking about Timo Werner, because he's under the curse of the number 9 at Chelsea, where they keep signing like a red hot striker and they completely flop. And it blew my mind when I was looking through the list of the strikers that they've had since the takeover, and the only one that has been an absolute rip-roaring success has been Drogba. You could probably say Anelka was good to a degree, but it's very few and far between. The amount of top caliber strikers Chelsea would sign after the takeover, and they would just fade away. And some absolute awful ones like Shevchenko flopped there, Samuel Eto'o,
That's right.
Crespo. They bought Kezman, the PSV Eindhoven striker, not long after the takeover. He was on Van Nistelrooy levels
at one point. Yeah, he was absolutely unplayable before he went to Chelsea. It seems to be an absolute curse when players went there, because even Torres, who used to be absolutely he just tore the Premiership apart for years at Liverpool, and then he ended up going to Chelsea, and it all fell apart for him, as well. I think the only other successful striker I can think of, other than the ones you mentioned, was Diego Costa, and even then, he's not to everyone's taste with the way he goes about playing his football. So, I mean, just to touch back on the 03-04, I think with Chelsea as well, I think, just to give a bit of context for perhaps people that didn't, have kind of always known Chelsea has been a team that have always competed at the top level. I don't think they'd won the league in about 50-odd years.
That's right.
Or something before they win it eventually, and I think it's 2005 possibly is when they win the league for the first time under Mourinho. So they were not, big heavyweights in the English game at all before the Abramovich money came in. And they were a decent club that were usually competing towards the top 4. But they were not a team by any stretch of the imagination that anyone thought was realistically going to be winning league titles until that money started pouring in. And I think it probably almost leans into how the modern day game works now, is money seems to be key if you're going to be successful. And I think perhaps, Phil, it's a sign that, with Chelsea having spent all that sort of money, perhaps that's why us Celtic fans, we can sometimes be guilty of thinking we can't compete in Europe because they're spending so much more money than us, and you only have to look at other clubs and examples of where that's happened and the success they're getting because they're spending so much more than others. It's not one I always subscribe to, because, as I say, I think Chelsea did quite a lot of bad business. They've probably done more bad business, you could argue, than good. But it's certainly an interesting argument, isn't it, in terms of how much of a factor that sort of money input can actually have.
It is, because after we went off the air last night, myself and Russell were just having a wee post-show like conflab talking about stuff and saying, like, look at a team like Sevilla in Spain, right? They've won 6 Europa Leagues this century alone, right? And it's like, do they spend massive amounts in relation to the rest of the Spanish league? They don't. You don't see, like, Seville will sell a player that comes maybe through their ranks, or they buy at a sort of cheap price. They've got that sort of player trading model, but you don't see Seville going out and spending 50, 60 million on a player like a Barcelona or Real Madrid might do, even though Barca are like strangely skint and can't afford anybody, but they seem to be allowed to. But yeah, and then you're like, well, look at like that, like how they can do that, how they can compete at that level and win like the Europa League so many times since 2006 or whatever it was, the first one. and it's just like they're not even need to spend massive amounts of cash in relation to the rest of the league. You know, the consistent Champions League performers, and say they win Europe's second trophy on the regular. So it's like you can definitely compete without having to. You've just got to be good with the scouting, I guess. It's going to come down to, and yeah, things like we've seen over the years, Celtic have been able to attract players from completely under the radar that are absolute, gems. But there was a period we went through, remember, where we would spend like $2 million on a random foreign striker from the continent, just take a punt. Rasmussen, Bangura,
Stepovic. There's all tons of them.
yeah, man. You just you've got to have, I guess, the right scouting. Else, maybe that's Seville's secret. Maybe that's what it is. They've just got that, the right network in place to identify players at a cheap price and then can sell them on. But yeah, you don't see many headlines about them going out and breaking transfer records, but they're consistently successful. And it's like, man, just one Europa League. I say we're so close to winning the 03 season. Just one would do me. Never mind 6. Jesus Christ, Seville. Come on, share the love a wee bit.
Well, I think when you look at Europa League as well, it's not as if it's always won very often by teams that are spending crazy money. I know Man United have won it fairly recently, but fairly often it is teams that don't spend an awful lot. You only have to look as far as last season to know that Rangers are in the final. It's not as if their big spend is. And I don't think Frankfurt are a team that spend particularly big. Certainly not shown through in how they've performed in the Champions League this season either. So I think there's definitely a way of getting at that tournament without actually having to spend big money. I don't think you need to have somebody taking over you, similar to what Abramovich did with Chelsea in 2004 to start competing in terms of Europa League level at Celtic Football Club. It's just a case we need to get the monkey off our back, I think, Liam, and actually start winning some of these games, that are crucial games, both home and away, and trying to actually win a game away from home after Europe and get through a tie after Europe, and then you can kind of move on from there. I mean, what's your kind of take? Do you think it is so much more now leaning towards money with how things were previously before Chelsea probably kind of set things going? It's kind of where I always look at it, where money starts entering the game in a big way. Do you think it's possible for Celtic to compete without having that sort of cash inputs that some of the other clubs in the bigger leagues benefit from?
I think we do. I mean, I look at Bodo Glimt. It came in the other last year that we ended up playing. I know that was UEFA, but they played in Champions League, I think, right? And I think they took a scalp off Roma 5-1 and stuff. And always teams like that are out there that are well coached and not have star players or big expense, but can play against the big boys. Sheriff, I mean, that's a team as well out of Sheriff. They took a scalp in the Champions League last year as well. They played
Real Madrid, beat Real Madrid in the Bernabeu.
Real Madrid, right? So, I mean, there's always it can always happen. It just doesn't seem to happen for us. That's all.
No, we've got the worst luck, as I always say, and it might just be just because we're Celtic fans, but I always feel like it can only happen to us. Some of the weird luck that we get, how some of the shoddy goals we always seem to concede. Just like you never see another team conceding a goal like that. Only we would concede that goal. So
you get one.
It's appropriate. Sorry, where will you go?
No, we've had goalkeepers as well that have played against us that have just had the games of their lives, and then you get refereeing decisions as well. I mean, I think lately the European refereeing that we've had has been pretty good the last maybe 3 or 4 seasons. But I remember around about the O'Neill years and things like that, some of the referee decisions we had were terrible. And I think because the game was so different across all the different countries in Europe at the time, that we came across as overly harsh, or and players need to be protected for us. But there was more stuff going on off the ball and simulation and all that. And again, we talked about that last week about the final, about being professionalism. Where we still didn't have that savvy yet that other teams did. I just call it cheating,
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, though, because obviously now we have VAR in operation, not just in Scottish football, but it's been in European football for a couple of years. And if we flip it and now ask the question, if Martin O'Neill's team had VAR back then, how far could this team have actually gone? Because there's certainly, I think you're right, Liam, there's questionable decisions in his first Champions League campaign against Juventus. There's a questionable decision, which I know we're going to touch upon tonight in the run-up. I don't think there's too much questions in the Porto game that could have went to VAR, because most of that's just minor things that was annoying. more than any particularly massively game-changing moments in there. But, I'll put this to you, Phil. If VAR had been in operation, would O'Neill have had a lot more success in Europe?
Well, definitely in that first Champions League campaign, because we get a point in Turin, and that 1 point is enough to get us into because it was Porto finished on 9, but had a better goal difference, was it? Or did they get 10 points? Remember we missed out?
Aye.
Yeah, I think they were 9.
I think they were 9 as well, and it was just the goal difference was better. But yeah, we had 10 points. We always talk about if we got to 10 points, we'd go through. So that would have been what we needed. That extra point would have got us there. So that definitely, and you never know what could have happened then in the last 16. Who knows? Because that team were, they especially the home ties at that point. Nobody was coming to Celtic Park and getting a result there. But it would have been amazing to see that in his first go at the Champions League to get into the second round, because we dropped in that UEFA Cup. And of course, again, Celtic's luck being the way it is, we draw a team that's just been in back-to-back Champions League finals at that stage, Valencia. Yep. But yeah, like this season, or the season we're about to talk about, the 03-04 season, I say there was some moments in that though where we just shot ourselves in the foot, like the Bayern game. That one was more down to our own mistakes with Hedman in goal. But the penalty at the end of the Lyon game is the one, because we were. When we get to it, I was stunned when I was doing the research of just how close we were to qualifying. Like that group, when I looked at the standings of that group before fixture 6 kicked off, I was stunned. I forgot how close it was. It's a bit like Tottenham's group is right now in the Champions League. I don't know if you've seen Tottenham.
All to play for.
Marseille, yeah. Our group we're about to talk about in the 03-04 season was exactly like that going into the last fixture, and I'd completely forgot how close it was. Blowing my mind. But yeah, that handball at the end of the Lyon game is the one, because I don't know, I think VAR might overturn that, because it's not conclusive. I think that does hit his hand. I think he just gave him an option because he's put his hand in the air. He gave the referee the chance to award it. So
I don't think it does hit his hand. I think if it hit his hand and moved, the ball doesn't really move. So I think it's fairly clear. To me, if that had went to VAR would overturn that one, and then you're possibly looking at again a last 16 opportunity. So it's an interesting one when you look back with hindsight. Now, if VAR had been in operation, Martin O'Neill potentially could have been in the Champions League last 16 twice with that Celtic team, and who knows what could have happened, as you rightly say. But I'm sure somebody will probably pick up on some decisions we got along the way that we perhaps forgotten about. Maybe wouldn't have went in our favour. It might have derailed the season or something. Somewhere along the line with him, but it's interesting when you look back on it with hindsight. I'm sure Martin O'Neill would have probably been screaming out for VAR, particularly after that game in Turin.
Oh God, extraordinary, shocking. Just a quick side note as well, we bit of extra trivia for you. We just did the top 10 transfers there. This is obviously the Chelsea takeover year. Their first signing under all this money that they got was actually Glenn Johnson from Portsmouth. That was the first signing of the Abramovich era, which I think it was like $6 million they paid for him, which is still quite an absurd amount of money. But yeah, for all the big glamorous names, it's actually Glenn Johnson that was Chelsea's first signing. Mental. That one always catches people out like, what, really? Glenn Johnson? I thought it would have been some exotic, extravagant player, but no. And he ended up doing no too bad at Chelsea coming in. But we'll quickly move on then and just get some of the other headlines out of the way, and then we'll dive into what happened in pre-season. So as usual, I always tell you what was like number one in the charts and so forth. So yeah, when the season kicked off on the 9th of August 2003, Celtic drew 0-0 at East End Park against Dunfermline. So on the same day, Blue Cantrell and Sean Paul hit the singles chart number one spot with Breathe. Number one in the album chart was The Quarrel with Magic and Medicine, because me and Russell did the Euro 04 show, and this is us going into that era in the mid-2000s where British indie rock bands are taking over. You know, the amount of bands that are about to come out with, say, the Libertines, the Kaiser Chiefs, Franz Ferdinand, the Coral, Snow Patrol, the Zootons, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, the Coral are number one in the album chart on this day. And if somebody fancied going to the cinema on the day that the season kicked off, why would you? The number one in the box office was Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, when Arnie decided to make a return to acting after his spell. I think he's been the governor of California at this point. Or does he go and become governor after this in the mid-2000s? It's after, right? Okay, I thought he'd had a spell as governor and then came back to acting, because, he comes back to do Terminator 3 in the year 2003. So, I've always, that's one of the ones that I've not seen actually, because I've not heard good things about it. I quite like Terminator 1 and 2, but after that, I think it goes off a cliff pretty quickly.
Exactly the same as you, Phil. I think I've only seen the first two of them, and then I think everything else afterwards just seems like one of those sort of money-grabbing movie franchises where they just keep churning them out and people keep paying for them, so just keep putting them out there. Even if the film quality is getting shitter and shitter, it's almost dumping on the originals really. Once you get up to however many they're up to, 'cause they did a few more recently. I think Terminator,
Terminator Genesis or something like that.
That's right.
If you look at that year, that was all at that point. If you look at what was the top grossing films, it was all sequels that year.
Right, okay.
It was the second Lord of the Rings. It was Matrix Reloaded, was it? Everything. It was the first time where everything was a sequel. There was very little originality in movies being made at that point, unless they were like real indie films. It was amazing how that happened, you know. And in North America, the music was different as well too. It was very much. It became power pop in North America at that point. There was still some underground bands and all that, but we didn't get the British invasion. We didn't get the good music you guys were getting at that point.
Yeah, I say this is like this period, the sort of mid 2000s, probably the last time I really paid attention to what was going on in the charts. I thought the indie rock scene was fantastic, but yeah, once we start going into the era where they decided that the download charts now count towards the number one singles, I've just felt like that was it. And like I said to Russell, when we did the Euro 04 one, the minute that we as indie rock fans lost the Kings of Leon to the mainstream, that was it. Like, I was in work one day and this girl who's going on and on about the Kings of Leon, right? She's like, "Oh, have you heard their new song, Sex on Fire," which was number one? I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course I've heard it because I like the Kings of Leon." And then I suggested some songs about, I should listen to this. I've said a few songs like Molly's Chamber and Holy Roller Novocaine and stuff like that. She was like, "Oh, is that like a new album or something?" And I went, "No, that album was out years ago." And it was at that moment I was like, we've lost the Kings of Leon, that's it, they're away. So as soon as they were getting embraced by the mainstream, I was like, man, this is they've stolen our band, leave them alone, you know. So that was how I felt about it. So the minute that happened, I was like, that's it, the game's a bogey, that's it, music's not for me anymore. So yeah, the mid 2000s was my last real point I really paid attention. Speaking of music though, I always go over what the big festivals did that summer. So Tea in the Park, but a dire one. REM and Coldplay were the two headline acts on the Saturday and the Sunday. That's a bit miserable. The other acts that appeared were Supergrass, The Darkness, Biffy Clyro, The Proclaimers, The Charlatans, Feeder, The Coral, Echo and the Bunnymen, Kings of Leon, who I was just talking about, Snow Patrol, The Streets and Super Furry Animals are some of the other notable acts. And at Glastonbury in 2003, again, REM, Moby and Radiohead. That's even more depressing than Tea in the Park. That's 3 nights of depression on the main stage. What? So other big names that appeared at Glasgow were Primal Scream, The Libertines, Doves, The Coral, Feeder, Manic Street Preachers, Suede, David Gray, The Waterboys, Flaming Lips and Supergrass all appeared as well. Now, going into our pre-season roundup, what was Celtic doing ahead of this season after coming off a UEFA Cup Final? This is something that Russell's talked about a lot. We've used the expression many times. In fact, we've used the expression all the way along in this Martin O'Neill month, where you need to strengthen from position of strength. And last week, I said, obviously, the transfer window, the summer one, it was a bit bleak because we only signed David Fernandez, Hedman and Henrik Larsson, but the only ones we signed in 2002. Well, in 2003, we signed one player on loan on deadline day. Michael Gray came in from Sunderland on loan. And the only other transfer business we did coming in was Stephen Pearson joined in the January window from Motherwell. And that was it. Now, of course, Liam, you said, I think it was last week's show, but if you're going to play devil's advocate, we didn't lose any of our top players because, again, this is a team that's just off a UEFA Cup final. Guys like Petrov and that are like a hot commodity, but we didn't lose them. But, again, you've got to look at what's coming in. And I think Sean Barlow, who's a good regular every week we do, Bustalgia, I think he said something a few weeks ago. We were talking about the Martin O'Neill investment initially, how he got front-loaded with money and brought in Sutton and Thompson and all that, and it got smaller every season, and it was like, was this sort of like Celtic? Something Sean said a few weeks ago about, do you think it was, they didn't, no, they trusted him, but it was just weird to see how they gave him so much money at the start, and it just got less and less, and it was like, this guy's delivering so much success, it's almost like they have lost trust in him or something. Something's going on anyway. Well, the money was just, I say, this is a loan. Michael Gray, Sunderland, who just got relegated to the English Championship as well. This might be the Sunderland team that I think finished bottom with, like, at the time was like the record low points as well. And we bring him in on loan for that season. But yeah, Liam, it's not exactly screaming the strengthening for position of strength, is it?
Well, it was completely underwhelming, you know.
Oh, it's a dangerous word to use, Liam.
Yes.
But it really was. I mean, Michael Gray, I'd heard of him only because of the Sunderland supporting mate and vaguely seen him, you know, a couple of appearances. And when he came to Celtic, I thought he looked good on the wing and that, but I don't know, he was past his sell-by date, I think, even when we got him, because he was at the downside of his career. I don't know where he went after us. Maybe he went to Southampton. But
I've got a vision playing for Blackburn. I can see him in a Blackburn kit.
You were trying to give us one of the answers to the trivia there.
Maybe squeeze one in there, see if they'll get any flinch for Phil there. But no. But yeah, underwhelming. It was like, all right, I really thought we would got maybe one marquee player in to strengthen the squad, and I think we definitely could have used one at that point. Just that other bit of steel to drive us over, you know, because I figured we'd be in the, you know, that would be us. You know, we would be in the UEFA Cup again this year. You know, we're a good side. We kept it all together, and we'd have a, you know, we can have a good run, and we did. But I think the fact that we didn't invest. But going back to maybe even Sean's point earlier, Sean Barlow's, you know, O'Neill might have been given a choice. Listen, you got money here to buy new players, or you get money here to just keep the wages going and keep the players that you have really happy. And maybe that was part of their remit. It's like, all right, stay one more year, you know, keeping that squad together.
Aye, and as you can see here, John, when Chris is saying, similar to Rodgers, his first transfer window was his biggest spend, and it seemed to get less and less every window that came along after it. But
I think it's an interesting one with Rodgers' comparison. So Rodgers certainly tries in his later windows to get players in, and notoriously John McGinn is probably what starts to push Brendan Rodgers towards the door because that deal doesn't get done, as we all remember all too well, unfortunately. And it's quite similar to Martin O'Neill because there's a common trend. The more years O'Neill's at the club, the less he's actually backed in terms of bringing new players in that are going to make an impact. And I know obviously it's not the season we're covering, but you know what we're talking about here is obviously going into this season. We know it's going to be Henrik Larsson's final season at the club, which gives the board plenty of time and the club plenty of time to prepare to bring in a replacement striker. And as you'll no doubt be talking about next week, it leaves a lot to be desired, to say the least, who they end up bringing in there. You know, as well, initially. So there definitely seems to be a bit of just reluctance from the board that they've kind of felt, we spent a lot year one with O'Neill, we've brought in Hartson year two, which was another £6 million. So it's almost as if time they get on to year 3 and year 4, they're kind of thinking, oh no, this team should be good enough to kind of see it out, and we're going to hedge our bets on what they're doing. And obviously kind of similar to, I guess, what we're talking about last week, is they were probably looking over the garden fence and seeing what Rangers were up to, and Rangers were also in a position where they were not strengthening their squad too much either. And I don't know if that's maybe what's played the factor in Celtic doing nothing. But as we said last week, Martin O'Neill almost is actually getting one hand tied behind his back in terms of transfer business the longer he's at the club. And it must have been so frustrating for him having to put up with that. Yeah, that was a shocker there, window. When I look back on it, I totally forgot it. I thought there was more than Michael Gray. I remember the Michael Gray signing. I just felt like there was more. I don't even remember him until I checked your notes. I was like, who is this guy?
According to the Celtic Wiki, he only played like 7 times. So you go on like CelticWiki.com, he only had 7 appearances. He does play in the first Rangers Celtic game of the season at Ibrox, because it's not long after the window closes. I think he's sort of like an emergency signing, essentially. We needed a right back, and that's why he was brought in. But yeah, he does play in that game, but he's used very, very sparingly throughout the season. And I think it was Sean that said everyone remembers Michael Gray for that penalty miss in the playoff final for Sunderland. I think that's the one with Charlton where they draw 4-4, and I think Clive Mendonca scores 4 goals for Charlton, or a hat-trick at least. But yeah, that's 1999 playoff final. It's the first time when I began watching football from the mid-90s I'd seen a game end 4-4. It was absurd. The playoff final at Wembley, Sunderland and Charlton Athletic, by Michael Gray misses the deciding penalty in the end for Sunderland. But obviously he's rocked up for us for this season. He is a big summer signing, everybody, on a loan. So yeah, it's not looking good. However, going out of Celtic, David Fernandez returned to Livingston on loan. Bobby Petr went to Fulham on loan. Steve Guppy was released from his contract and he joined Stoke City. And of course, the aforementioned at the start of the show, Stephen Craney, he joined Southampton for 1.3 million. Over the other side of the city, though, we obviously keep an eye on the competition. And I've said before, because myself and Brown Warrior, usually we're always having a debate between ourselves. So I'm on the show and he's in the chat about Brendan Rodgers, and he'll always talk about Brendan didn't have any competition. We'll see this Rangers team that Martin O'Neill was up against this season. You want to call, honestly, this current Rangers team would give this Alex McLeish Rangers team a doing, by the way, because fucking Rangers brought in Nuno Capuccio, Zurab Kishnanishvili, Paulo Vanoli, Henning Berg, Emerson, Egil Ostenstad. A grand total of 650,000 was spent. Only Capuccio commanded a transfer fee, and I think they literally bought him just because he was a Porto player, and it would be seen as like a wind-up to us because we just lost to Porto in that UEFA Cup final because he was rotten for them. And leaving Rangers that summer was Dan Egan, Arthur Newman, Claudio Caniggia, Bert Konterman and Jerome Bonicel. They all left for nothing. They didn't get any transfer fees for them. They either retired in Newman's case or the rest of them were just released from their contract. And the only way they made money was they sold Barry Ferguson and Lorenzo Amoruso to Blackburn, and Neil McCann joined Southampton. So it's very top heavy in selling players that summer. And again, it goes back to the hindsight being 2020, Jonathan, we've talked about. A massive downsizing was going on right in front of our eyes. But at the time, don't know if we really picked up on it. But yeah, this Rangers team, I can remember, we were signing Henning Berg, who's like 34 at that time. Egil Ostenstad, who was ranked rotten for them. That's a stinking team. Not that I'm angry about it. I'm happy to see that. But yeah, they were really downsizing, weren't they, man?
And it's an interesting one because from a Rangers fan point of view, they'd been looking at it after winning all the domestic trophies the season before, and obviously keeping an eye on the rivals, seeing them get into a European final, would have been thinking, well, we want a piece of that, as well in the upcoming season. We want to be making more of a dent in Europe. If Celtic have proven it can be done, and we've managed to beat them in all competitions in Scotland, then we should be able to compete in Europe. And with that sort of activity by the board, they're just not going about it in the right way. But obviously, as we would learn to find out, there was a reason why they were not going about it in the right way, and that was because they had one eye on the debts that were accruing, and they needed to make sure they were able to pay back. But yeah, I think, as I say, when Celtic have looked at their business, they've seen what's gone on there, and I think when you see guys like Barry Ferguson and Amoruso in particular leaving Rangers Football Club, then that is a massive shot in the arm for Celtic before they even look at their own transfer business. That's almost like two signings for us, just them two getting removed from the Goldfish Bowl of Glasgow and not having to deal with them anymore. So I think looking at it, I think Celtic would have been always going into that season relatively confident, despite not strengthening, that they would be able to wrestle the title back from Rangers with the way that they'd set themselves up for the coming season.
Aye, definitely. So as we'll find out, of course, Liam, going for into this season, we certainly did wrap up so against them. So the green and whitewash is coming. Even at that time, I don't think we could have foreseen what was about to happen in terms of like our results against them, because as Jonathan says, they've just came off winning the trebles. You have to expect that they'll still be they'll run as close, but yeah, it's mad how much we absolutely body them into it.
Well, it's you see their style of play, especially when hindsight watching that green and whitewash. They look like they replaced their flair players with grafters. Guys that can get in and get in amongst it, because we had a very, very hard physical team, and we had a hard physical team that had gained confidence despite losing the treble. We'd went to a final, and you could tell, as the way it panned out, this was a confident team, and I think they were looking to find battlers who could battle against guys like Sutton and Hearts and that, because we were bullying them. I mean, other than Arteta pretty well ran out of there as well, because he got bullied off the ball with guys like Stephen Pearson and stuff. But when you watch them playing, they started taking they became really cynical in their play, like guys like Craig Moore and stuff like that. And it was, when you watch some of the fouls and the hacking and all that, it's a lot like the Rangers team today. It's like they've always had a John Lundstrom in their team.
You think
Aye.
they took it for granted a little bit, the fact that they'd won all the domestic competitions the year before, that they maybe thought, even though they had to downsize financially, that perhaps Celtic weren't as good as they perhaps thought. Even although it was fine margins, the league could have went either way. The League Cup, as we discussed, could have went Celtic's way. UEFA Cup, Celtic could have easily done a treble in 03 if things had been ever so slightly different. But do you think Rangers perhaps took their eye off the ball in the competition there as well, given the fact that they won everything and there was complacency setting in?
It's very possible, yeah. I mean, it's easy to happen. You know, you fall asleep at the wheel, essentially. You know, you get in that wee comfort zone and you're like, we'll be fine. So we've seen it happen enough times to us, in my lifetime especially. So there's a good chance that, and the thing is, that was only after one season. They just lost the previous 2 league titles quite comfortably behind us. And then they get a treble and suddenly, they're like, you know, they could easily have just suddenly thought, we're back now. We're the top team again. We're going to, but I say what we're about to see this coming season is quite the opposite, isn't it, Liam?
Aye, definitely. Since that point, we reacted.
Yeah, we did. And the reason only by bringing in Michael Gray, but we reacted, man. That was who we brought in. There you go, Michael Gray.
Michael Gray.
There you go. We've discovered that he's actually the difference, guys. Michael Gray. Simple as that. That's all we needed.
He was the influence in the changing room we didn't know we needed.
Didn't play that many games, but he was the influence that we needed. He drove us on to achieve what we did in this season. But I'll quickly round up our pre-season games. So we started off going back to, Henrik Larsson's home country, Sweden. We played a few amateur teams. We played a team called, I believe it's pronounced Smogens, Smogensis, before. We beat them 7-0. This is a lower league team. Then we had a team called Gais, Gais, beat them 2-0. Again, lower league teams in Sweden. But then we did beat Helsingborg. I've heard of them. That's obviously Henrik's old team, beat them 3-2. And as was tradition, it seemed to be the case every time the pre-season rolled around during this era. We would go to London, and in particular, we'd always play at Loftus Road, because the previous 2 seasons we've beat QPR, but this year we weren't playing QPR at Loftus Road. We played Fulham, because Craven Cottage was meant to be getting demolished and rebuilt, and they moved into Loftus Road for a year. And it never happened. I guess the deal all fell through for it. I know they've done a bit of work on Craven Cottage recently, where they've improved one of the stands, have added to it, but they haven't knocked it completely down and rebuilt it. But yeah, Craven Cottage was definitely the odd one out at that era of the Premier League. Like what Bournemouth Stadium is now in the Premier League, like it looks very out of place compared to the rest. Craven Cottage was that in the 2000s. But the one thing I remember about Fulham in this era at QPR was when they played in QPR Stadium, was they had a striker called Facundo Sava, and his goal scoring celebration was he had a Zorro mask tucked away in his sock, and when he would score, he would put the Zorro mask on. That was his celebration, because people always Saha, because Luis Saha played for them. So it wasn't Saha that did it, was Sava, Facundo Sava, an Argentinian striker, I believe he was. But I always remember whenever I've got images in my head whenever you see him celebrating, it's always at like Loftus Road. They're playing at QPR. But yeah, we beat Fulham 2-1 there. As I say, seems to be a weird tradition at that point, always playing at Loftus Road in a pre-season friendly. We then headed to the USA to play some friendlies as well. We got absolutely trounced by Man United 4-0 in Seattle, Washington. And then we went to Cleveland, Ohio and played Boca Juniors and beat them 1-0. Chris Sutton scored the only goal there. And then we finished the pre-season with a 1-1 draw with Arsenal at Celtic Park. Both, of course, those teams are going to win their respective titles this coming season. And I was at this game, and I remember that Celtic were wearing the black and gold away kit, the Black Magic, with Carling across the front of it as a sponsor. I think widely regarded as one of the best away kits we've ever had. Definitely in this century. It's iconic. And they've tried to recreate it a couple of times. You saw it with New Balance a few years ago. They did one with the alphabet across the front, and it was obviously the same colour scheme, but I don't know, just something about that kit. It's timeless, I feel.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant kit. And even, mentioning the Arsenal game, there's a little bit of foreshadowing there, because I believe it's a certain Liam Miller. Correct me if I'm wrong if you were at it, Phil, but I think Liam Miller is the one who does score for Celtic in that game, and it's a pretty good goal from memory. I think he takes it on his head, and then he actually almost does like an overhead kick with it that squirms in just past Seaman into the bottom corner. But it's a bit of foreshadowing there that we were onto a bit of a player, because it's a very good bit of technique from Miller to actually get the goal in that game. And obviously he's going to go on and have a very big part to play in the coming season ahead. But the kit, going back to that, Liam, I think that might well be my favourite away kit. I mean, in terms of the kits you've seen Celtic play in, where would it kind of rank for you?
I love it. That's my favourite kit of all time. I played on a 5-a-side team, and that was their kit. We managed to get full squad, shorts, socks, everything, all sent there, and that was the kit we played in that year. And so it was brilliant. I mean, I still wear that kit now and again. I don't wear a lot of kits, but that one I do like to pull on now and again,
It's a timeless one. You do see it wheeled out when you go to the game. There'll always be somebody that's got that kit on. They've got it from somebody passed down from generation to generation. But or maybe they're still the same size that they were in 2003 if they're lucky enough. But you do see it on the regular. But I'll say this: see the away kit that we had at the end of this season that we wore in the cup final, because we went from the black and gold of this season. Next season's away kit's the dark green with the silver. That's a good away kit as well. And something me and Russell mentioned before on this about when you wear away kits, particularly in cup finals, there's something you always associate that away kit with the moment. And obviously, as the away kit we were wearing when Larsson scores his final goals for the club, so it's always associated with Henrik in that cup final. But I thought that green and silver one was a belter. Umbro, I mean, they were great kit providers for us in the end, because we're about to change to Nike in 2005, so we're not too far away from the Nike changeover. But the Umbro kits at this stage, the home kit for this season, I thought was an absolute screamer as well. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. It was, I think, the New Balance one for Brendan Rodgers' first season took inspiration from it because of the way the green hoops were, like the way the colour was done, where it started like bright in the middle and it got a bit darker as it went to the edge of the green hoops. I was like, they've taken inspiration from the 03-04.
It's interesting on that one as well. So it was like a buttoned up one in 03-04 as well, wasn't it? So that's pretty rare. Even at that time, I don't think I'd ever seen a buttoned up football top at that point. I owned that one, and it was one of my favourite tops to wear about the house when Celtic were playing, as well. So it was definitely iconic. But I mean, to be fair, in Martin O'Neill's era, I can't actually think of many bad kits that were actually made. I think they're all special in their own way. So you can certainly look back on any of them and be quite happy to pull them out of your wardrobe if you're lucky enough to have them and put them on. I say timeless, that's the best word to use compared to some of the stuff we've seen in recent years, particularly the New Balance era. Yeah, these ones are timeless. And the final wee story that I'll touch on from pre-season, just before we go into the musical interlude, we've just passed the hour mark, is as we've mentioned already, Henrik Larsson was kind enough to let us know that he won't be staying after his contract runs out at the end of the season. But as I said last night at the end of the TNF, he's gave the board the whole year's notice. Surely they can't get that wrong. They've got plenty of time to figure it out. I say spoilers, we'll be dealing with that one next week. But yeah, that's the other major story in this pre-season. So when we come back, we'll be diving in now to the 03-04 season. So yeah, folks, we shall be back in 2 minutes.
Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.
And we are back, folks. So, yeah, 2003-2004 season. Here we go. Let's get right into the meat and bones of this one, because first big story we need to deal with is we are back at the big table, hot off the heels of getting to the UEFA Cup Final. And this, of course, is before the days where if you won the UEFA Cup, you got an automatic Champions League spot. Obviously, we were the runners-up in the UEFA Cup Final. Of course, we were runners-up in the league as well. So that meant we did get a Champions League spot, but we'd have to go through a few rounds of qualifiers. But luckily, due to the coefficient at the time, we were a seeded team. So we start off with playing Lithuanian side, Kaunas. Dad said last week when I said Sedova, are they Romanov's team? But no, it's Kaunas that are Romanov's team.
Yeah.
Funny enough, Romanov, another name that will be playing a part in our near future as well when he comes in and takes over Heart of Midlothian. But yeah, we played Kaunas and we beat them 5-0 over 2 legs. Pretty comfortable stuff. And then we followed up against MTK Hungaria. Beat them 5-0 as well over 2 legs. God, the days when we just used to cruise through qualifiers, no danger, no drama, nothing like, as I said, the Astana game when I mentioned it the other week, where I was like, we're 5-0 up for the first leg, and at one point in the second leg, we were 4-1 down in the game. You're like, how could this happen? How on earth could this happen? But yeah, we had 2 5-0 aggregate victories in the qualifiers, so no danger at all, and we are into the Champions League again. We're back at the big table. Martin O'Neill's second crack at it, and of course Rangers have also qualified for it. I can't remember if they got an automatic spot or they might have had to play around the qualifiers, but either way, they were in as well. This was the first time that Celtic and Rangers were in at the same time. So we got Bayern Munich, Anderlecht, and Lyon in our group, and they drew Man United, Stuttgart, and Panathinaikos in theirs. But of course, Celtic, the way the fixtures come out, usually more often than not, we always have to start in the hardest way possible. And yeah, we were sent to Munich for the first game in the old Olympic Stadium. So now, of course, Munich play in the Allianz Arena. But the Munich Olympic Stadium is still like in operation. It's just basically an Olympic stadium again for like athletics and stuff. I don't think any football teams use it now, but it is still there. And it's like it's like a real good work of art when you see the roof and stuff like that, the design on it, because they built it for the 70s World Cup, I believe it would have been. 70. There was 72 was Munich won to Olympics, and then 74 was the World Cup as well. Germany had back-to-back like major tournaments in our country, so yeah, it was built for that, and yeah, it's still standing to this day. But yeah, the roof on it's like a real work of art. But when you see the Allianz Arena now, you see what they moved into. Yeah, with the lights and stuff outside the stadium, the way it all lights up different colours, magnificent. But yeah, this is the old school one. We are playing them first. Now, of course, big sub-story here is Magnus Hedman is in goal, and he's about to play a very, very big part. Shockingly, though, Jonathan, Celtic take the lead in this game. A goal that's no too dissimilar to what we saw the season before against Stuttgart, where it was a cross to the back post, and Alan Thompson came running in, heads it into the net, and puts us 1-0 up, not long into the second half. And we hold our own for quite a while, and you're beginning to think, after the exploits of the season before, showing that we could go away from home in Europe, even though it was UEFA Cup. Obviously, this is Champions League, but you still think, we're holding our own here, we're going to get away with it. And then Magnus Hedman happens. Roy Mackay scores a brace, and of course, the goal that's remembered is the one that I don't even know if I want to say it was a shot. It was more sort of like put a long ball into the box, hoping maybe somebody would get a nod onto it, and it just bounces in front of Magnus Hedman, and he completely misjudges it. And it flies over him into the net, and it was like, oh my God! Oh, again, the bad luck of the goalkeepers at this point, wasn't it? It really was.
Oh, it was terrible. I remember this game quite well because I think I'd ended up getting my dad had ended up getting called out. He was worked as a PT engineer at the time, so he ended up getting called out to one of the exchanges. So we had to listen to it on the radio, and I remember the commentators being like, "What has Magnus Hedman done?" Pretty much, they were all pretty much shouting, "You will not believe what's just happened in this game." And you got home and you seen it, and you were like, "What the actual fuck is going on here?" It's like a cross that's just been like looked in. It's got no pace on it for anyone who hasn't seen this. By the way, it's like literally, it's a very straightforward catch for a reasonably solid goalkeeper. I don't even think he need to be that solid. I think I could have at least tipped it round for a corner. But I don't know what Magnus Hedman does. He almost just kind of collapses to the floor, and it just floats right into the back post. But Celtic had been so good that night and got themselves into such a good position. And I guess it's one of those things that's always been the blot on Martin O'Neill's time at Celtic was goalkeeping mistakes and not having a strong enough goalkeeper, although ironically, later on in his European campaign, a goalkeeper does come to his rescue in a couple of games. But on this particular night, Magnus Hedman, Liam, he was murder, wasn't he?
Well, he started off I was excited when we got Hedman. He was a Swedish international, and he looked really good. He looked strong. He looked commanding. He played with Henrik, so he played with Mjällby, so he knew that. He knew the team in that as well. But I see that game. That was when I don't think he recovered from that, and I know his fans as well. Just lost a lot of trust in him at that point. And once you lose the trust in your goalie, that was it. The writing's on the wall, and it really was at that point as well. He just, let himself doing, let the team doing. It was a terrible game, and it just looked sloppy because he was a good keeper.
He just seemed to be plagued with mistakes because Sean Barlows, as he did Hedman play most Champions League games this year, can mind him in Munich away and Lyon away. Yeah, the Lyon one, which we're going to get to, because we talk about the Bobo Baldi incident at the end of the handball, but the second goal that Juninho scores, it's like it goes right through his hands. But we'll be getting to that very, very soon. But yeah, he did play in those ones in particular, which of course in the end is cost us. But yeah, it's a hard luck story. So we just came out of the UEFA Cup Final a few months before, and it was, you could argue, goalkeeper maybe cost us there with Robert Douglas. Magnus Hedman gets the nod in the very first Champions League game we play against one of the real heavyweights, super heavyweights in European football, Bayern Munich. We take them so close to winning, but winning 1-0 to the 75th minute, and then they get 2 goals late on to beat us 2-1. Roy Mackay scoring both of them. As I said earlier on, he's just signed for them from Deportivo. And I believe he's also part of Rangers' backroom staff, but for how much longer? That remains to be seen. What's that like?
One. It's the same one. That's the Mackay. It's at Rangers, aye.
That's it, Roy Mackay. Makaay. It's spelled, it's a Dutch spelling. It's not like the Scottish spelling, like Mckay. But he's just signed from Deportivo.
It was Deportivo, and they'd been really good. I think the season before in the Champions League.
I think that might be the one they beat AC Milan, wasn't it?
Possibly a semis. I can't remember exactly how far they got, but they got quite far into that competition. You're right. I think they scalped AC Milan. I think that was a crazy game.
Oh, it'll be this coming season because Milan won the Champions League, so I think it's this season, 03-04. They're 3-0 down for the first leg and beat them 4-0 in the second leg.
That's right. Yeah, Deportivo. They were a very strong team back then, and he was a top striker. He was one of the most sought after in Europe at that time. So a little surprise he ended up at Bayern Munich. Little surprise he ended up scoring against us as well.
Of course he did. Well, whipping boys for these guys, honestly. Now, we did bounce back though, guys. It wasn't all bad because, again, as it also comes hand in hand with Celtic at this time in Europe, bad away game, good home game. So we go to play Lyon next at Celtic Park. And, it's actually 2-0 in the end with Liam Miller busting on the scene. This is the one that announces Liam Miller to the world. But the Chris Sutton goal in this one in particular, I've mentioned this before, is a real favourite of mine because also we know how good Larsson and Sutton's partnership was together. And for me, this is one of my favourite link-up goals between the two of them. When it comes from a throw-in, and Chris Sutton takes it and plays it to Larsson, who goes out wide left. But if you watch the actual the TV footage where the camera is mounted at Celtic Park, you can see quite a lot of the park at that end of the stadium. And if you watch Sutton's run rather than what Larsson's doing on the left, basically Sutton from that throw-in just runs in a complete straight line, doesn't need to break his stride or bend his run in any way. And Larsson, skins the defender out wide left, and he knows where Sutton's going to be. So Larsson has a brief look up and just clips into the middle. So Sutton doesn't need to adjust his speed or nothing. He just keeps it going and gets his head on it and heads it into the corner. And for me, it's just like one of the best elongated 1-2s I've ever seen, where the length of it, like from the throw-in, that run, it's a phenomenal bit of link-up play. But again, that's what Larsson could do. Even if it was Hartson in that position, he would still be lethal with him because he was just telepathic, wasn't he, Jonathan, at times? Genuinely telepathic.
Yeah, he definitely was. I don't know what's going on
that's
there.
That's the Martin O'Neill Claxon, everybody.
That's the Martin O'Neill Claxon coming off in Canada, I think. I mean, Larsson was incredible again that night. And I know a lot of people have that down as one of their favourite Henrik Larsson games, even though he doesn't actually score in it, because the assists are beautiful. And it's very rare you see a game like that, Phil, where they're almost carbon copies of each other, both the goals. In a lot of ways. So it's like both of them, I'm pretty sure Larsson's out on the left a man just to put the ball pretty much right onto the attacking player's head. Obviously, it was brilliant to see him link up so well with Sutton, and he's just running the Lyon defenders ragged. I think Lyon had done quite a good job of keeping him quiet for large spells in that game. I vaguely remember it being quite a frustrating night. And I believe the goals both came maybe in the last 20-25 minutes in that match, where they were a bit later on, so the crowd was getting a wee bit more restless. So it wasn't what we were used to under O'Neill in Europe. We were used to beating teams by that point, and whilst Lyon were a strong team and they were the best team in France, for those who maybe wouldn't know that at that time, Lyon were like the PSG of France back in the mid-noughties. They were winning it constantly, League One, but yeah, the performance from Celtic that night was excellent. And I think Larsson's assists, as I say, they're quite often right up there as people's favourite Henrik Larsson moments, is the sort of telepathy that you're talking about with that link-up play. And I know for a fact it's one of Chris Sutton's favourite goals as well.
Oh, it's a belter there goal. And I say the other goal that Liam Miller scores, your namesake Liam, it's a carbon copy. It's from the same area. Again, Larsson just looks up, clips into the middle. Liam Miller gets the head on it. But I mean, this boy just came roaring on the scene that season. And obviously, a few years ago he passed away of cancer. And when I was on Endless Celts, we were talking about the 03-04 European campaign for this one. We mentioned it as well. And again, it's just like I've been affected by cancer. I lost my mother in 2015 through it. It's not something you would wish upon anybody, but what a shock it was. I believe he was 36 when he passed away. He was definitely like about the same age as me. I'm 37, so it's like, roughly the same age. And it's scary that, we're talking about the 03-04. I'm just like 18 years ago, talking about these great memories, and it's like he's no longer with us. It's actually scary, but what an impact he left that season, performances like this.
He felt like the signing that we were wanting that year. We were looking for a marquee signing, and there was a lot of talk about Liam Miller and how he was playing with, I think when we had reserves or whatever it was, the second team. Then, there was always about when is he going to show up, and then bringing him in this season, I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was a really good, and I wish we'd have seen more of him. We were always asking, like, as fans, I remember it was like, well, let's give this Miller boy a chance. We've just heard so much good stuff, and when he came on, he didn't disappoint. Disappointed the way he left, but
it's
updated on it.
I say, well, that's coming up in the next home game. The story behind that one, but it was a hell of an impact he made. And yeah, you're right, Liam, what you're saying, where that was the type of player that we needed. He was right under our nose in the end, so he did feel like a new signing because he'd been on Celtic's books for quite a while, but he'd been injury prone. But this season, he got his chance. And he certainly did take it on literally the biggest stage he could take it. The Champions League of all places. Phenomenal talent, and an absolute shock a few years ago with that news. Devastating stuff. But
I think he started that game. Did he start that game against Lyon? Can you remember if he actually started it or not?
I can check it now. I can have a wee look for you on the Celtic Wiki. I'll find it.
Because what I was going to say was whether he started it or not, he was beginning to get himself into the first team. He had played in the league games in the build-up to that, and I think he scored a couple from memory up until that point. Also, as I touched on, he obviously got the goal against Arsenal in pre-season as well. So he was always kind of in the mix. Be interesting if he did start it, because I would have thought for him to start, he'd have probably needed somebody else to have been ruled out in the middle of the park.
Came off the bench, 64th minute, he replaced John Hartson, and then he scored in the 70th minute. He scores the first one, then Sutton scores in the 78th. But he came off the bench to say that's it. He come on and take the game by the horns essentially, and he's made an impact. What it's like what do you call it? Ryan Christie-esque type impact. A guy that's been on the outskirts of the first team comes on as a sub in a game and makes sure that everyone knows his name by the end of that match. Because phenomenal talent. And say this season we definitely were spoiled with some of the performances that he put in. Now, of course, in the Champions League again, I say good home game, bad away game, and we followed it up. We went to the fourth seeds in the group, Anderlecht. We played them away in Belgium in the first. This was a double header in the middle of the group, fixture 3 and 4. And typically we lose on our travels. It was a sucker punch as well, because we were actually the better team for the most part. Anderlecht went down to 10 men, and then Ivorian striker Aruna Dindan scored the only goal of the game. I believe this is the one that a young 17-year-old Vincent Kompany who played in the game says that whenever he's asked about who's the toughest opponent you've played against, he always says John Hartson from this set of fixtures against Celtic, because he was only breaking into the Anderlecht team. I can remember at the time, because again, if you're a champ manager player, I think it was still champ manager in 2003, 2004. Vincent Kompany was one of those like hot prospect players that you had to sign. You could get him for really cheap from Anderlecht because he will evolve into a phenomenal player. And yeah, the people who make champ manager were right on that one, because he certainly did over the next few years. Of course, the second leg, we get our revenge on them and beat them 3-1. We are 3-0 up inside the first half an hour of the game. Larsson, Liam Miller again scores, and Sutton scores. Dindan does get a goal back for them in the second half from, I believe they miss a penalty, and the rebound comes back to him and he scores to make it 3-1. But in the end, it was pretty comfortable. However, the story goes with this one is Alex Ferguson was in attendance at this game to watch Vincent Kompany, and it was somebody else that he came away seeing that night and was more impressed with. And of course, when you think of it as well with Kompany, who he went on to play for, and what he achieved at that team, and it's like, oh, you missed it there, didn't you, Fergie, as well? You could have stopped that one. But yeah, the story is he was at Celtic Park that night, particularly to watch this hot prospect, Vincent Kompany, but it was Liam Miller that got his attention that night. And I believe Roy Keane, as the story goes, Jonathan, that he also had a bit of a say of it, got in Alex Ferguson's ear and said about this kid, Miller, you've got to try and get him.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of a regrettable one all round from a Celtic point of view, with what's to come with Manchester United signing up Miller in the January window, and then from Manchester United's point of view, Miller never really makes it at United. Whereas if they'd signed Vincent Kompany, there's no doubt in my mind he would have made it at Manchester United. At Manchester United, he was a proper centre half, and he would go on to prove it with, ironically, their rivals and captain. Their rivals a number of successes over United in the coming years. But, if you're going back to Liam Miller, I think it speaks volumes for how highly this player was rated, because you've got to remember he only really just broke into the first team at Celtic in the summer of this season. And then, within 6 months, he's already got Manchester United sniffing at him. And that's all on the basis of some absolutely brilliant performances. Particularly in that Champions League group campaign. I think the games that always stand out are obviously the Lyon and Anderlecht games, because he scores in both of them. But as I say, even in the league, I think he was scoring pretty consistently almost every other week as well, up until the point where he scored, particularly again at Celtic Park. I think he was proven to be lethal and was enjoying the extra space he was able to get playing on our pitch. But it was a cracking move for Liam Miller at the time, but from our point of view, Liam, it was frustrating. And I remember there being quite a bit of a backlash from the fans as well, wasn't there?
Aye. Well, even, Liam and Miller had been injured a long time with us. The reason he got into the team so late is he had fairly significant injuries that the club got him through. And I think there's always a thing for the fans when you're waiting to see a player play and you don't get him. And then when you finally do get him, you see that, wow, this is a really good player. And then he was just gone so quickly. We didn't really get a chance to get to really see him. But the bits that we did, it was like, oh, this guy's going to be a player. And I don't think this was a Tierney situation where we got like a load of cash from
free transfer.
No
money at all, right? So that's always a wee bit shifty, especially when you see a player through injuries and all that.
Yeah.
I always feel for the club a wee bit at that point. It's more for the fans that pay his wages, And I think he could have gave us another year or so and then went to Man United.
Aye, as Scott says there, Ferguson ruined his career. Essentially, that move to Man United, he could have done with another year up here, because that was his first real taste of consistent first-team football. I always felt he had very similar characteristics in the way he played to Petrov, with those late runs into the box from the middle of midfield. And of course, we still had Petrov at that point, so you get the two of them can make those runs from the middle of the park, a late run into the box. So it was quite a double whammy to have in the middle of the park. We were overloading when we were coming forward. The attack was overloading the defence and stuff like that. So yeah, he was a good foil alongside like Petrov in the middle of the park. But I agree with you though, Liam. He probably could have done with an extra year. But at the end of the day, you got to remember at this point in time, Man United are like, they're not like what they are now. I mean, they're still arguably one of the biggest football clubs in the world on reputation alone. But this is a Man U team that are hoovering up trophies for fun around it this era. Alex Ferguson's Man United, they very rarely had a trophyless season. So when they come knocking, especially when Roy Keane was also their captain, Ireland captain as well, it's like they couldn't say no to it. And fair play, but I understand. I remember at the time as well, the fan backlash was around a lot of the whole, look, we stood by this kid with injuries and stuff like that, and for him to walk out for nothing at the end of the season. But that's what it is. It's football. See, nowadays, if that happens as well, wouldn't be surprised. It's modern day football. It's just the way things were going, sadly, at that point in time. Money's about to become king. We saw it with the Chelsea takeover that summer. Money is everything in the game, sadly. And to this day, that bubble is still growing. It hasn't burst yet. It's still growing, unfortunately. Now, after that game, obviously, we are heading into the Bayern Munich game, and this speaks volumes, I think, for where Celtic were in terms of a European force. And again, could you imagine this happening? A team the level of Bayern Munich coming to Celtic Park now and drawing 0-0 and being happy with it? They were delighted at the end of the game. They held us to a frustrating 0-0 draw. We couldn't get the goal. Neither could they, but yeah, they just played essentially for the point. They were happy with the point at the end, celebrating with their fans. And it's like, you tell that to a young fan nowadays who might be too young to remember this, and it's like, man, there was a day when Bayern Munich were like delighted to draw 0-0 with us, and nowadays you look at what's happening in the Champions League, or even just the Europa League or the Conference League, as we've seen in recent years. Teams can come to Celtic Park and swat us aside, no bother. Copenhagen, we've seen Mulder under Ronnie Dyler, when Cluj beat us in that Champions League qualifier. Some absolute Bodo Glimt, aye. Teams like that, and then here's Bayern Munich, one of the biggest teams in world football, delighted to have got a draw with us, and that just shows you, Jonathan Duntett, where we were in terms of reputation in the pecking order in European football. Teams genuinely were afraid to come to Celtic Park at this point. Genuinely.
Yeah, I do remember they celebrated that as if they'd won the game when it finished. And I think Celtic had the better of that game as well, from what I remember of it. It's not an instant classic by any stretch of the imagination when it finishes 0-0. But from what I remember of that game, Celtic were definitely the team that did more of the pressing, were actually the team that were on top as well, which might sound surprising to people that don't remember Celtic or didn't see Celtic at this time. They were actually taking the game to Bayern Munich, and they were the ones who were probably feeling unfortunate to win. And I think, as much as the Bayern Munich players were celebrating that win, I think the Celtic players would have been fucked off that they only drew it as well. I think there was that element that guys like Larsson and Sutton, they'd have been like, fuck's sake, only a 0-0 draw with Bayern Munich. Such was the mentality of that group of players. They felt they should be beating anyone at home. They didn't like giving up a single inch at Celtic Park, and it showed. Martin O'Neill's team at this point are on an incredible run domestically at home. I don't even know if he's ever lost a game at this point domestically at home in the league anyway. If he has, it's been only on a handful of occasions. In Europe, he's been absolutely outstanding as well. There's just a proper fortress sort of build to Celtic Park there, and I think the players probably would have came off there really frustrated. They didn't get the job done, Liam, because then, as Phil's been suggesting throughout the evening so far, good at home, bad away, and then it's obviously left us in a position where we need to go to France and get at least a point to get through. How were you kind of feeling? Can you remember how you were feeling after that game? Were you frustrated, sharing the players' frustrations, or were you kind of feeling, okay, and now they'll draw with Bayern Munich, that's not a bad result, we've still got a good chance of getting out of this group when we go to France?
That's what I thought. I thought at that point, I was optimistic at that point that we'd still get out that group and do it. Bayern Munich's still an amazing team. A lot of their players were playing for Germany at the time. Germany were shit hot. So it was good. Like for us, being practical about it, I thought we had a great chance and I thought we'd done really well. And the fact that they were happy with a 0-0 draw, that just shows you how we were back then. But I think the whole, anytime they talked about Celtic Park, it was always a fortress at that point.
Yep.
And we've lost that, and we've went over this. We've talked about, it being too happy. And I don't think the fans have changed any. In fact, I think we're louder than we are now than what it was back then. I think what it is it's the emergence of the team and the fans being all one unit. We still have players that look like they're they're enjoying part of the, the festivities and all that as well. They're not getting the same like swagger and that this that O'Neill's teams had. There was nobody out there just happy to be in the Champions League.
Aye. There's a video this week. Did you guys see it? The Shakhtar, where the person videoing the Shakhtar team at the end of the Champions League anthem, and so many have got big daft smiles on their faces and are laughing about it. And it's like, it's a bit of a conundrum that we're in, because we've talked about this on the bus, how we need to make it an intense atmosphere to intimidate them. And it was loud on Tuesday night. I mean, it was so loud during the anthem. Again, it's one of the stadiums around Europe, it's known. You can barely hear the Champions League anthem. So there's the crowd literally doing their part by bringing the noise. And they're still laughing at us, still laughing with a big smile on their face, like, oh, this is great. Oh, I can't wait for this game. And it's like, what more can we do? Like, what more can we literally do to this?
We need to be winning these games. That's what we need to be doing, because as far as they're concerned, it's not about the fans. It's why they're really smiling. It's because they're looking across at the team they're playing against, and it's not like 2003, 2004, where you're looking across and seeing fucking guys like Larsson, Sutton, Thompson, Lennon, all these players that are going to give you a game, and they've already built up a reputation as being a very European savvy team. Martin O'Neill's team, by the time we get to 03 or 04, been in a European final the year before. Bayern Munich knew they'd have to take us seriously at this point. Celtic, as we'll touch upon, ironically, this season has still got some relevance even now, because Celtic actually last time they won a European tie after Christmas is the season we're discussing, which is absolutely crazy.
I know.
And I think, when you look at it like that, you can understand why players from opposition teams probably think, the fans might be loud, but who cares? The team's shy. We're going to beat them. And I think that's the mentality that the opposition teams have. And when they're coming to Celtic Park, it's like, it's great, we can soak in this atmosphere, and it's brilliant, and we can enjoy it because we know we're going to get away with 3 points or get a draw, whatever we need to progress in the European competition. And I think, again, you heard more patronising comments, I think, from the Shakhtar manager, I think, today or yesterday, saying again it was like the most intimidating atmosphere he's ever played in, and he's played in stadiums twice as big or whatever nonsense I think I'd read in the papers today. So, again, it's one of those ones where it almost feels like every time we now play at Celtic Park, we've got the opposition manager or one of their players coming out and saying that atmosphere was incredible, but they're saying it with a big smirk on their face because they got the result they wanted. Whereas, in contrast, if we go back to 03, 04, Bayern Munich would have been like, atmosphere was great. We were shit scared because that team gave us a proper game, and we were quite happy getting away with a 0-0 and getting back on a plane to Germany, saying thank you very much. We avoided a defeat there. And that's what Celtic have to be aiming to try and do again. I don't know how they go about it, but it has to be done by finding ways to win, so you build your reputation up the same way Martin O'Neill did back then.
Well, the thing is, with the point they were happy with, this blew my mind when I was looking at the research for this one and going through the fixtures and the standings and the table, because a point for him, and it could be what you said a few minutes ago, Jonathan, where Bayern probably knew in the back of the head that Celtic don't travel well, and they've got an away game with Lyon, and they're at home to Anderlecht in the final game, because the standings going into the final group game, so we're going to Lyon to play, and I say Bayern are at home to Anderlecht. So Lyon are top of the group on 7 points. Celtic are also on 7 points, and so are Anderlecht. They're on 7 points. Bayern Munich are bottom of the group with 6 points, so you would think, say, a point for them in that last result. Maybe that doesn't sound that was a good result, but again, they might be thinking, right, Celtic have got a hard away game here, and we've got quite an easy home game. So far up to now, Anderlecht have shocked a few, say they're sitting on 7 points as well. Celtic had a better goal difference of +2 to Lyon's -1 going into the final match. So if Celtic were to draw the final game, they would qualify ahead of Lyon. So we just had to avoid defeat, essentially. Now, Elber, of course, gives Lyon an early lead because, of course, it's Celtic away in Europe. Why wouldn't it be an early lead? Make it difficult right for the start from us. So, yes, Giovanni Elber scores. But Hearts had equalised midway through the first half. It was a shot that just came back out to him, and he had basically a tap-in into the empty net. It just rolled to the goalkeeper saved it, and he palmed it back out in the middle of the box, and Hartson just follows in. This, of course, is a game where Martin O'Neill, there's no pragmatism here, because, yes, a draw will take us through, but no, he starts Larsson, Sutton and Hartson. There is actually a picture out there, if you look up on Google Images, of the three of them like standing over the ball at kickoff, like ready for the game to start, and it's just like, no fear from O'Neill at all. He's like, no, we'll go and we'll play and try to win this game. We're going to go aggressive here. So Hartson gets us back into the game, but in the second half, not too long into it, Juninho, Brazilian maverick that he was in the middle of the park, a free kick specialist as well, but this wasn't even a free kick. He pings one from about 25 to maybe 30 yards. It's a bit of a daisy cutter. It kind of is low and it bounces a wee bit, but Magnus Hedman, again, judges it completely wrong. He dives down to his right-hand side, and it literally just goes through his hands. Like, there's too big a gap between his hands, and it goes right through, and Lyon take a 2-1 lead at that point, and it's just like, oh my God, this guy cannot buy a break right now. It was a right sickener, but of course, a few minutes to go, 10 minutes to go on the clock, we actually get a lucky break, which isn't like Celtic away from home in Europe. Momo Silla is at the centre of this goal. He closes down a Lyon defender who tries to hook it away on the left-hand side, and Silla presses him, and it bounces off of him and rolls into the middle area, and Chris Sutton just follows it in and slides it past the goalkeeper to make it 2-2, about 10 minutes left on the clock. And as it stands, at that stage, we are going through and to qualify for the next round of the Champions League. We've done it. We've got the point. Surely now we can't throw it away. But Jonathan, then it happened to Bobo Baldi. Then gave the referee the option, didn't he, mate? He gave him that chance to award that penalty.
I was fucking raging. I remember watching this one and I was absolutely raging. I was raging at the referee more at the time. I remember, and whilst Baldi's been so silly because he has got his hand out, and you realise that when you get a wee bit older, you're like, well, what was he doing with his hand out there? But I remember being absolutely furious at this referee at this point. I was throwing a proper tantrum because I'd seen Baldi's gone for it, but as I say, even now to this day, I'm convinced this doesn't hit his arm. His arm's out. It doesn't need to be out in that position. He gives the referee the decision to make. The referee, unfortunately, goes against us, and it goes back to what we were saying about VAR. If it's in place, I don't think that it's given us a penalty. But Celtic being Celtic, VAR is not in operation back then. Hands out. The referee thinks it's hit the hand. We get the penalty given against us. Lyon go and obviously convert, and then we get knocked out on our arse. It just always felt to me, Liam, when we were talking about Martin O'Neill, because a lot of people sometimes like to compare O'Neill and Strachan because Strachan had that next level with Celtic in the Champions League. He was able to get them out the group on a couple of occasions, whereas O'Neill wasn't. I just felt that Martin O'Neill got hit with such bad luck in this competition as Celtic manager. He was really unlucky, probably on 2 occasions, wasn't he, not to actually get out of a Champions League group.
I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. Like, sometimes the refereeing that we had just went against your style of play. I mean, if Russell was here, he'd be saying, we had arrogance. We were an arrogant team. And you wonder if that rubbed the referees the wrong way as well. Because there was a lot of referees that just seemed to take a dislike to us. And so that when we did get something like, that ball brushed against Baldi, I don't think it was ever a handball at all. I mean, I was raging as well. And, it's at that point where you start thinking, oh, Christ, this is like a European agenda, it's just wanting the big clubs in, because big clubs at that point were starting to, take the centre stage. You were starting to see Bayern Munich strips all over the world and Chelsea and all that. It became much more an international game at that point. And so, I was like, they just want to, big up the champions, with the big clubs and that. But, I thought that's when it started to change, and I think he did have bad luck. He did have bad luck with referees.
And it goes back to what I said earlier on. Only Celtic. This can only happen to them. It was just such a Celtic thing to happen where we've put ourselves in a great position. This point is all we need, and then that happened for the handball and the penalty. But guys, here's a question for the two of you. I was quite happy we were dropping the UEFA Cup because of what we did the year before. I thought we were going to go all the way to the final again. Did you think that as well?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And again, that's what this team and this manager do for you, is what Russell says about the arrogance and all that. You as a fan believed that. We talked about it last week where he thought the UEFA Cup run, and Russell was saying that a lot of the players like Sutton and that probably thought we're better than most of this lot. And as a fan, you believed it when they showed it, when they got all the way to the final. So when they dropped down into the UEFA Cup again after being in the Champions League and going really close to qualifying, I was like, I don't fear anybody in this. I do not fear a single team. I don't care who we get drawn against. And of course, we would get one of the biggest teams you can get. But I was the time. And I'm glad that you guys are the same, because it's not just me then, because I think a lot of fans would have felt the exact same in 2004. Like, we've got another UEFA Cup final coming here, and we're going to win it this time. There'll be no mistakes the second time around, but yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't to be.
The way we progressed to the final, there was nothing fluke about it. There was no luck involved there. That was hard work, and but it was also dominant displays against very, very good sides. So there was absolutely no one to fear at that point. And I thought going into it, and especially with it being Larsson's last season as well, maybe this is the send-off that we're waiting for as well, because we were seeing it happening in the league. I'm sure we'll get to that, but because you could see the way we were dominating play there, and why shouldn't we dominate Europe as well?
I think that's a brilliant point, Liam. That was the exact point I was thinking of. There's a romanticism about it being Larsson's last season that you were thinking perhaps the stage is set for there to be a bit of revenge of Henrik after what had happened in Seville the year before, that maybe he'd get his redemption in his final season. And, you know, Celtic can be a bit of a fairy tale club at times, and you could almost see the story in front of your eyes before it was even written. It was there for Larsson to go ahead and get his redemption in his final season and sign off with that European trophy. But I think, when you looked at what we did in 2003 in the UEFA Cup run, you were looking at it and thinking, it doesn't matter who we end up playing in this. I fancy us, particularly at Celtic Park, to get the job done. And there was no real reason to fear anyone in that. I think, you know, in hindsight, I guess you could argue, if you get into the Champions League, if we'd seen the Lyon game out, odds are you could potentially get looked at getting knocked out in the next round, such as the quality of the team. It's not that we'd have thought that as Celtic fans with that team, that we would have get straight knocked out, but there's no doubt about it, there is a step up at Champions League level even then, perhaps not as big as it is now for the Champions League to the UEFA Cup / Europa League, but certainly when we dropped into that, I was thinking we're going to go pretty far in this competition and hopefully make amends for what happened the year before.
Definitely. I was 100% in that camp as well. Now, we dropped down, and this is something that I completely forgot, because everyone just remembers the Barcelona game and thinks that's who we drew right away, but we didn't. We drew a Czechoslovakian team named Teplice, who beat 3-1 on aggregate over the two legs. But then, of course, we get drawn against Barcelona. So now, after beating teams like Liverpool and stuff the season before, it's like, well, this is literally the biggest team we possibly could have got in the competition. But yeah, we actually, in a very eventful night in the first leg at Celtic Park, we beat them 1-0. Alan Thompson scores a goal. But of course, the subplot in this one is there are red cards galore. Referees handing out cards like it's Christmas time. At half-time, Robert Douglas and Thiago Motta getting a bit of a scuffle. I believe Bobo Balde was actually at the centre of it, but the referee never... I don't know how you didn't see Bobo Balde.
Before half-time. It's what happens before half-time. Bobo Balde gets uppercutted by Motta right before the interval, and the referee misses it. Unbelievable. If you go and watch it back, it's ridiculous when you see it again. He's literally both jumped for the same ball, and Motta's underneath Balde, and he's properly uppercutted him like a boxer would. Tyson Fury would have been proud of that jab. And I think that's what kind of sets the whole thing off in the tunnel a few minutes later.
Jackie Mack talked about that in one of the open goal things, and he was saying that they all knew Bobo was waiting for him in the tunnel, and they were going, "Oh no, calm down." And it was when the referee came in and said, "Right, he got the numbers wrong," and that was Rab Douglas, and they just looked at, "Right, Rab, you're off."
How can you get it so badly wrong? You think it's the keeper?
Oh my god, they're wearing a completely different kit. The keeper wears a totally different kit for the outfield team. Oh my god.
Well, they don't look alike either, do they?
I mean, no, they certainly don't. No.
Probably the furthest apart looking players in the whole starting 11, I would have thought, but aye. There we go. Feels like European referees are capable of making the same honest mistakes as the Scottish ones at times, I guess.
What I is, I remember the half-time, it was Dougie Donnelly was hosting for BBC, and he announced it on like the half-time sort of like break. He was like, "We've just got some news footage that Robert Douglas and Thiago Motta have been sent off, and we didn't have Hedman on the bench, thankfully, after the season he was having. I believe Sanchez Broto was away at this point, but we had young David Marshall on the bench who hadn't played a game at this point, so he has to come on for the second half. But in the end, he manages to keep a clean sheet, although the other clean sheet that he keeps is a more memorable one, but people forget he had to play that whole second half as well. So he had a whole game and a half against Barcelona and didn't concede a goal, so fair play to him. But in the second half as well, Javier Saviola gets sent off as well for Barcelona, so they're down to 9 men But Alan Thompson does score the goal in the end. It's like a scissor kick he scores into. It's like cushion down header in front of him. He lets it bounce, and then just a side scissor kick volley into the net. He makes no mistake with that one, and we take a 1-0 lead out to the new camp, where of course a star is born. And David Marshall is like, no, thou shall not pass at all in front of that Barcelona team, because they could not find a way past this kid at all. It was a sensational moment. It was one of those games, again, that I was literally watching behind the couch at times, because it was uncomfortable for that 90 minutes. Like, oh my God, every time they were coming forward, you just felt like they were going to score. But David Marshall, wow, what a moment. It's just a shame that his Celtic career just never really went on to what it could have been. After this, you just felt like, oh, he's going to be our keeper for years. And you said earlier on, Jonathan, with Martin O'Neill's track record with goalkeepers, you know, it's like, man, this kid is again, Lee Miller again busting onto the scene, coming through youth. You know, this is it. This has been the answer all along. He's right here under our nose. But I just never worked out for Marshall. But amazing memories of watching that night. What a phenomenal performance.
I mean, to be fair, I think since he came into the team that season till the end of that particular season, he has quite an incredible run. Obviously, the highlight being Barcelona away. I think, you know, if you're looking at those two legs, though, I mean, you've just gone back to the home leg. Celtic rode the luck quite a bit. I mean, we talk about the fact we don't get much luck. I think all of the luck in the world was on our side over those two games. For once, the footballing gods were smiling down upon us, because I think Barcelona must have missed about 2 or 3 one-on-ones at Celtic Park, where they just put them wide. It's nothing even to do with the goalkeeper. They just missed them completely. And then obviously we get the breaks with Seville losing his head, because he's having a very frustrating night. I think he's missed a few sitters by that point. He lashes out in the second half. I think Alan Thompson gets him, he kicks once the ball's well gone in that particular moment, complete rush of blood. And then, you know, Celtic do what Celtic do best at Celtic Park under O'Neill, find a way to win. But you have to say, even going into that away, like, I remember thinking, we're fucked. Because we're going to have to put David Marshall in goals. I think John Kennedy starts at centre-back as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Chris is saying John Kennedy was amazing this night as well.
That's right. So he is. So John Kennedy was playing centre-half, and he could barely have featured at all in a Celtic top up until this point, probably the odd game in the League Cup or whatever before this. So again, you're coming in with a very inexperienced goalkeeper, a very inexperienced centre-half. You're thinking the writing is on the wall here for Celtic to get a pasted from this Barcelona team that had Ronaldinho in it, by the way, who was quite highly regarded as, if not the best player in the world, certainly in the top 5 at that time. And I remember the game at the Nou Camp, I think in the first minute, just like we were talking about typical Celtic, creating their own problems early on. The instruction was scoring the first minute, and that perhaps set the tone. It's like 30 seconds in, one of the Barcelona players breaks clean through and goal, and Marshall somehow gets down and scoops it off his feet. And I think that sets the tone for what happens at the rest of that game, Liam. But I mean, for you, what were your kind of memories of that? I mean, were you quite similar to me? Did you kind of feel, even though Celtic had to make so many changes to the team, did you see something like that being possible?
Oh, well, I like games like that. I like to see Scottish players come in and do well for Celtic. And I thought having Marshall and again Kennedy in that team, I thought it looks really fun. I mean, Marshall, you know, when that game finished, and same with Kennedy as well, it's like you found £20 in the back of the couch or something. You know, it's just one of the feelings. It's like, oh, hey, they've always been there, and that was good. And it's like, all right, well, this is optimistic. This is good for the future. You know, I feel like we've got a goalie here, knowing that we've always struggled with Otto, Hedman, Douglas, and it's like, oh, here we've got one right in our ranks. So let's see how that pans out. But, you know, we know it never really. And then Kennedy never really got running as well. You know, it was too long before he got that career-ending injury. But
I think it was the same season, Liam. I think he gets injured for Scotland in the same season, not long after that game. It's crazy.
Against Romania.
Romania, the friendly. A friendly as well, not even a competitive like qualifying game, a friendly. Wow.
And I remember the big criticism was there was nobody come here and challenged that Romanian player that you know, halved him, you know, and there was nothing about it. Like there was no the team wasn't angry, you know. It was a weird Scottish team back then, you know. And anyway, I felt just really bad for that after that. But watching the Barcelona game, both of them two looked like we found, all right, there's another, you'd Liam Miller. All of a sudden, with these new players coming in, that we'd grown ourselves. So all of a sudden, looking back at, the lack of activity in the transfer window, all right, it seemed like, okay, Martin's got this under control.
All these great youth players coming through, something that, is a bit few and far between.
Stephen Pearson came into the team that year.
Quite a few. Pearson played well against Barcelona as well. I don't think they knew how to defend against this big lanky ginger guy in the middle of the park running at them. They didn't know what was going on. They're like, what?
He was like the Scottish kid. Get him, Pearson. He had an engine on him. I remember the old Champ Man games as well. His pace was up at 20 as well. He was something when it came to speed. He was a bit raw in that first season, but I definitely put a shift in, as they all did, over those two games. It's one of the most memorable games for me, even under the O'Neill era. Even though it's a different sort of win, it's kind of more the sort of win you'd associate with Celtic now, rather than something that actually happened back then. Because it wasn't really like Celtic to win a tie like that under Martin O'Neill. Celtic usually won them by playing the better football. They were normally the better team in most of the games. That was probably perhaps the only time I can really think of under Martin O'Neill's spell at the club where they were by far under the cost, second best over the two legs, but managed to dig it out by the goalkeeper putting in one hell of a performance. Whereas, if you're looking at more recent times, like when Lennon did it against Barcelona, it was all hands to the pump, and it's very similar to how the game at the Nou Camp played out. So it was interesting to see O'Neill getting that rub of the green that perhaps he never had in the Champions League. And I guess, Phil, after we knock out Barcelona, we must have been feeling even more confident. I remember thinking, it's definitely going to be us now. It's definitely going to be us now. And I would imagine you must have been the same.
Yep, especially when we drew Villarreal. And I'll be honest, many of the viewers will obviously know that my football knowledge is not too bad. But back then, I hadn't even heard of Villarreal. I was like, who? I was like, Villarreal? I was like, if we beat Barcelona, who's this lot? We're going to beat them, no problem at all, because this is really before Villarreal had really announced himself on the European stage. Nowadays, they're quite well known. But obviously, the yellow strip is very distinctive. They've won a Europa League in recent years against Man United. They've been a sort of consistent Europa League, Champions League team. But at this point, they're still on the up, but they've got a talisman in Juan Roman Riquelme in the middle of the park. He was going to play for Barcelona in the next few years, but he bossed it because we played them at Celtic Park. We drew 1-1 in the home game. But again, you look at what happened in the UEFA Cup the year before. We drew 1-1 with Liverpool in the first leg at home, 1-1 with Boavista at home. We went away and we won. So we've just got through against Barcelona. What could possibly go wrong? But no, we went out there and we just did nothing. We just fell apart against them and lost 2-0, 3-1 on aggregate, and off we popped out of the UEFA Cup. But here's a wee question for you guys. Do you remember who actually did win the UEFA Cup that season? It wasn't Villarreal, by the way. It wasn't him.
I'm not even sure who else was in it, to be honest, by that point. It's interesting because...
Portuguese team.
What team?
Was that a Portuguese team?
No, it wasn't a Portuguese team. They did win the Champions League, though, Porto. They did win that.
Porto did win the Champions League, aye.
Patrick McLaughlin's got it. Patrick McLaughlin's got it. It's Valencia. It's Rafa Benitez's Valencia. They beat Marseille in the final, who had Didier Drogba up front. So would you have fancied their chances against Rafa Benitez's Valencia or Didier Drogba leading the line for Marseille in the final? Who knows? Because, that was the 04 final. It's one of these sort of obscure, forgotten ones. It's no one that ever gets talked about in the annals of time, or the 2004 UEFA Cup final, but it was Valencia beating Marseille.
Really interesting that, though, because both Benitez and Drogba would both go on to have really successful seasons, the following year. Benitez leads Liverpool to the Champions League, and Drogba obviously goes to Chelsea and helps them win the Premiership. So their careers both ended up going not too badly after playing in that European final.
It's not too bad for them.
All the audience will know this, right? But at the beginning of this campaign, supposedly Drogba asked, was it Momo Sylla, if there was any chance, if he thought he could get a game for Celtic. And Momo Sylla said, no, you've got no chance. He got
what?
No chance.
Momo Sylla?
Yeah, they played in the same...
That man's dead to me.
With Henrik Larsson about to leave, and we're going to talk about, obviously, in the next episode about the failure to replace him. Could you imagine if Didier Drogba rocked up at Celtic Park?
I mean, how beautiful would that have been, right? I mean, that would have been a match made in heaven.
Oh
You
my
know?
God.
Certainly would have been an upgrade on Henri Camara anyway.
Yeah, it certainly would have. Certainly would have.
Minor upgrade, obviously.
But we've obviously looked at the European campaign. It was a hell of a campaign, to be fair. I say a lot of fond memories of that one. But of course, domestically, I know you guys have been waiting on it. This is the season of the green and whitewash. What exactly did that entail? It meant every game we played against Rangers that season, we beat them. 4 league games, 4 victories, and we even knocked them at the Scottish Cup as well. But yeah, of course, it starts off now. You guys will remember this. It was at the time before Satanta. There was 2 years where Scottish football was on BBC Scotland. The 2002-2003 season and this one. Yeah. And for this season, they were going to do something different for all the Celtic Rangers games. They were going to broadcast them across all of the UK, because originally it was just on BBC Scotland for the season before. All the Celtic Rangers games were just through that. But they decided for this season, they were going to show them all like on BBC England as well. Gary Lineker, Alan Hansen, the full like match of the day pundit team came up to Glasgow to cover the first game at Ibrox. I can remember I actually watched it because on Sky Digital you could go on to like BBC England and watch it. If you watched it on BBC Scotland, it would have been like Dougie Donnelly or something, right? But you could watch it through the English one because I wanted to hear their opinions on it. Because I'm like, okay, they're coming up here to watch the marquee fixture in Scottish football. I want to hear what their opinions of it are at the end. But Jesus Christ, I suppose as a neutral, as a spectacle, this game was honking. It was terrible. I mean, from our point of view, we won the game. It was fine. Rangers didn't really lay a glove on us. But this is the game where just a minute after we kick off the second half, John Hartson scores from out wide. I think he tries to cross it more than anything. So I don't know why he'd be shooting from that angle. It hits the inside of Zurab Kijdanishvili's leg and loops over Stefan Klos into the net. And we end up going on to win it 1-0. But I always remember that this game was like the first one that they broadcast across the whole BBC network, because they were thinking, oh, this is the big game. It's got Celtic Rangers. It's going to be amazing. It was a bit of a shocker of a game. But hey, we got the 3 points anyway, and that's all that matters.
It was an ugly goal. To sum up how it was an ugly game. I mean, if there was ever a goal to sum up how a game had went, check out John Hartson's goal at Ibrox at the first Old Firm game of 03-04, because it's a stinker. Again, it's a good bit of fortune from Celtic's point of view, because I think it takes that deflection. I think Klos almost gets a fingertip on it, hits the bar, just bounces over the line, if I remember it correctly. So it's very ugly, but I think, you've got the English press coming up. I think they might have been looking at it being something similar to what had happened the season before. So I think the first start of the season before had finished 3-each in an instant classic at Celtic Park, and they were probably thinking there was a few really good derbies the season before as well that were very tight games with plenty of goals. But this one it just wasn't one of those. It's one you almost forget about once it's over, and it's probably the most forgettable of all the derbies this season, I would have thought.
I don't know. I lose all perspective when I watch a Rangers Celtic game. It's like I'm just that bundle of nerves the whole game. Yeah. There's enjoyment in it. Even when we're ahead, there's still guys trying to half your players and shite refereeing decisions and all that. There's never a minute's peace. I think that's why I love watching them so much. But that goal, I thought Hartson celebrated as if he meant it, didn't he?
Oh, aye, because down at the...
Oh, he's definitely claiming it. He's having that as one of his tally.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, but it's a really... When you look at the trajectory of it, it doesn't make sense, from a physics side. How did the ball even take that path? And it hits the inside of Kijdanishvili's leg, and it goes up over Klos. It's such a weird goal, but hey, they all count at the end of the day and we'll take them. But yeah, the sort of subplot to this game was this is a game where Rangers fielded a lot of their new faces and they didn't look up too much. They egg-loshed. I remember I watched this game with all my mates and we were just like, this guy, man. I remember he played for Southampton and that during the sort of 90s in the Premier League. Henrik Berg, way past his best. Emerson, he was at Middlesbrough alongside Juninho and Ravanelli. He wasn't up too much. And I say Nuno Capuccio, he just looked like, to use a phrase that Mark uses on here, he looked like he'd won a raffle, Nuno Capuccio. That's how bad he was. He was rotten. So I would go on and win that 1-0. The next game, though, we absolutely trounced Rangers in the New Year game. We beat them 3-0. Petrov scores the first goal. It's a header, which I believe hits one post, rolls along the line and hits the other post and goes in.
And just crosses, Yep.
And then Stan Varga scores one as well, who began to get more games during this season. I can remember Varga. It was like, that was a good piece of business. We picked him up last season after the January window had closed, which means he wasn't available to play in the European run in the second half of the season, where you think, well, when Bobo Balde goes sent off in the final in the UEFA Cup, we obviously brought on Henrik Larsson, who I know last week Russell was saying, Dave's a Danish international playing for Hibs, which was quite good for like Hibs stand to get a guy of that calibre, but Stan Vargas showed to be a really shrewd signing at that point. And if he was available for that UEFA Cup final, if he could have came on during extra time to try and shore it up with Balde getting sent off, could have been different, because it is Henrik Larsson that was on the line that tried to block Delvy's shot. He couldn't. And Stan Varga managed to hook it away. Who knows? One of those ifs, buts, and maybes, what might have happened. But he does get a goal in this game to make it 2-0. But the game is capped off amazingly by Alan Thompson scoring a free kick that Shinsuke Nakamura would have been proud of, because I think it's honestly about the same distance out of the Man United free kick that Nakamura scored. But this one hits the crossbar, I believe, on the way in as well. It's an absolute screamer of a free kick from Tomo, but he was good at scoring a good goal against the Rangers, wasn't he?
He certainly was. He certainly was. And I think when you're looking back at that game, I think Celtic were already running away with the league even by this point. This was January, and I can't remember what this was. I think it might have been taken about 14 points or something, which is crazy when you consider how tight the title race had been the season before. But I think Celtic were already running away with it, and were almost over the hill by January that season. But it was another really strong performance. Thompson's free kick is the most memorable goal of the game, but it was utter dominance this one, and I think it's probably the most dominant performance against Rangers out of the games to play against them this season, wasn't it, Liam?
I first of all, I thought Petrov's goal was right up there as well. I mean,
header.
You've got Hartson jumping up for a header. He misses it by about half an inch, and then it falls down, and Petrov sees it, runs in, and gives it a diving header into the goal. He says it hits both poles. It's fantastic. By the way, Alan Thompson was in some bit of form at that point. I don't know if it was that game or the next game where Sven-Goran Eriksson was in the crowd.
Okay.
Because I remember he showed up with that Italian bird as well. It was absolutely gorgeous, and we were like, "How? Him? Oh, no chance." Anyway,
money, mate.
Money talks. We were saying that at the start of the show. Money talks.
England were screaming out for a player like Alan Thompson to play with, and there was still that Scottish-English bias, I think, going on at that point. But the fact that he came up and watched him play, and I think he did get a cap somewhat after.
He got that cap that season. You're right.
He really deserved it, and I'm sure it's a big thing to an English guy to play for England and all that. And unless you're Chris Sutton, doesn't get a bother. But I think he really wanted that, and after he played with him, his form dipped. Once he sort of achieved what he wanted, then he sort of regressed a bit. But I thought Alan Thompson, that year after Seville, I thought he became one of our best players. He really took charge, and he had a battle with Rickson all year as well, which was interesting to watch. Rickson really got under our skin that year. Despite us battering him, he became sort of like a pantomime villain at that point,
Yep.
I remember Rickson as well. He was definitely one that liked to get himself involved in a lot of shenanigans. Touching on Thompson, it was interesting. I thought he did have a really strong season. He was on the penalties at the start of this season, and I always remember this. I don't know why. He always hit his penalties in the same side that season. He was always going to his right. He was going back across himself to the goalkeeper's left, and he does it we actually get a ton of penalties in the league this season. I don't know what was going on with the refereeing, because it's very unlike us to get this many, but we get an absolute shed load of penalties at the start of the season this year for some reason. And then he misses one. I think it's against Lyon. And he does the exact same thing. Goes to the same side. And the Lyon keeper goes the right way and saves it, and he gets taken off them, and actually ends up going to Sutton when he's back fit. But Thompson was scoring for fun. It wasn't just penalties, but it was just interesting. The fact, if you ever watch that season back, the first 6 or 7 weeks, he gets a penalty almost every other week, which, as I say, is very unusual for Celtic to get that many. But he always goes the exact same. He always goes the exact same side, and then the Lyon goalkeeper clocks him when he tries it in the Champions League game and that's when they changed it to Sutton. But he was fully deserving of his cap. Completely agree with Liam. I think that comes later on. I think that might be after the game at Ibrox potentially in the league. I think it's around that time he ended up getting called up to the international break around then. But he was. I mean, I think they all kind of had a point to prove, though, didn't they? Really, Phil, this season they were all kind of pushing on quite a lot. Even as I say, by January to be 14 points clear. I can't remember that happening too often when Rangers were as strong as they were then.
Yeah, well, Patrick McLaughlin just saying on Tomo there, he's saying, he scored a goal in Munich, so he couldn't be ignored much longer. And then Patrick follows up by saying, plus, he scored the winner too against Barcelona. So Eriksson had to have a look at that point because, you can't pass off the excuse like he's only doing it against Scottish teams. Bayern Munich and Barcelona, he's scoring goals against, so he couldn't be ignored any longer. And it's literally like a wide midfielder who's English that has a left foot that functions that England were screaming out for so long. And it's like, this is your guy, but you get one cap for half a game against Australia in a friendly where it was one of those games where he subbed the whole team at half time and it was like you only got half a game. So you get a raw deal there, certainly from Sven and the English FA, because he was definitely worthy of a bit more from them, definitely, and could have solved a few of the problems. But well, as a Scotsman, I'm not going to complain too much about that one.
No.
Now, Celtic and Rangers would meet again in the Scottish Cup not long after in March. Henrik Larsson would score the only goal again by a scrappy one. I think it was at a corner. The ball bounces around a wee bit like a pinball, but he's there at the right place, right time, just side foots it into the net. And that was all she wrote in that game. And we go on to win it 1-0. And Rangers' chances at the Scottish Cup is now gone. That's that out the window. They're falling apart in the league. And of course, at this point as well, they've already lost the League Cup semi-final to Hibs because we get knocked out by Hibs. And then Hibs knocked out Rangers in the semi-final, only for Hibs to then lose the final to Livingston. Which was a bit of a surprise at the time. So, Rangers now...
That is so Hibs, that is unbelievable how much of a Hibs thing that is. Only Hibs could do that.
I wonder if that's where the original Hibs that came from, because that is a pure Hibs that really, really is. That is a shocker. To put out Celtic, to put out Rangers, and then to lose to Livingston. Jesus.
They get done quite heavily, I think, from memory of that. You know, because it's like 4 or something.
No, I think it was 2, but if I remember right when I was watching it, Livingston were like vastly better. Like Hibs just completely froze on the day. Livingston probably could have won by a bigger scoreline, but I remember watching it. It was on Channel 5. Channel 5 covered the Scottish League Cup for a couple of years, and the year before, the first year they do it, they get a Celtic Rangers final, so they're loving that. The next year they're covering it, they get a Hibs Livingston final, and then conveniently Channel 5's deal suddenly expired with the Scottish League Cup after that.
Didn't want any more of that.
No more of that nonsense, please. No more. But by the time the teams then meet again in the league in March at Ibrox, Celtic are 16 points ahead at the top of the table. Henrik Larsson and Alan Thompson scored the goals. Stephen Thompson did get a late goal for Rangers, but it was just a consolation at the end. And Celtic are 19 points clear, and the title is now in sight. There's no way they're going to blow it at this point. But of course, the one game out of all of the green and whitewash that is remembered, and the one goal that is always remembered, guys, he is a favourite on the bus. We talked about it when we did his episode as well, because he deserved his own episode, because he is the man. Chris Sutton, who most people would look at his figure and go, he's a big guy. He's also about physicality and stuff like that. But no, Chris Sutton had some serious takers. He really did. He could put a bit of finesse on it. And this goal that he scores to win the game, it's an end of season affair. I think it was like the second or third last game of the season. It's 0-0 late in the game. It's a warm day in May 2004. And it looks like the game's just winding down. It's going to end 0-0. It's going to have no bearing on the league anyway. But then a long ball from the goalkeeper is headed on by Sutton. He nods it on to Henrik Larsson, who just shields it from Frank de Boer, who comes tight to him, but no, he just shields it. He plays it back into the path of Chris Sutton, who runs onto it. Frank de Boer attempts to tackle Chris Sutton, who just goes, get the fuck out of my way, and just shoves him to the side. He looks up and just gently clips it over Stefan Klos, who's way far off his line, standing about the penalty spot, and it just sails over into the back post. And 92nd minute, I believe it was in. But yeah, what a way to wrap up a final game against them that season, to complete the green and whitewash and to win every single fixture against them. As I say, it's the most celebrated goal. The celebration is iconic. I even put Sutton's expression on the thumbnail that I created for this one, because it's an iconic moment in his career and in recent Celtic history, isn't it, Jonathan? It's phenomenal, that goal.
It's so good. And it was beginning to feel like it was going to be one of those days where it's kind of end of the season. Perhaps it's not as important because the league's already done, and it was kind of being played out in an end of season sort of way. Rangers were obviously keen to avoid defeat, and I think the thing I always remember about that is, when the goal kick gets taken. See if you ever watch the highlights back of that. Rangers fans are actually in full voice, delighted. They're going to get a 0-0 draw at Celtic Park. This is the best bit about it. If you watch that back, they're actually like doing the bouncy and all sorts in there, being like so happy that they're going to get a 0-0 at Celtic Park and avoid the whitewash. That's how far their standards have fallen. After winning a treble the year before, they are now at the point where they are going to be celebrating getting a 0-0 draw with Celtic at Celtic Park after losing every competition they were defending at the start of the season. And you can actually watch it because there's a reverse angle where Sutton does the chip, and you can watch them just stop. They stop celebrating all at once, and it's very entertaining.
There's Patrick McLaughlin literally saying that. I always remember the Rangers fans celebrating the draw when we were taking that goal kick.
That's right. That's exactly what it was. Patrick remembers it as well. It's when you see the reverse angle in the replay, you'll see it. They're all celebrating, and you can still see some of them in the background when Sutton does the chip. And you just see them all sitting back down and just realising, fuck, Celtic have done it to us again. But I think, to get such a goal of that way, in some ways, it almost is like poetry. It's almost kind of similar to what happens when Larsson does the chip in 2000. It's just it's the other way. It's the other way round. And in some ways, I think it was the last thing any of us expected Sutton to try, because Sutton doesn't do that. Sutton doesn't normally try to do like chips from the edge of the box. It's not something we associate with Chris Sutton, is it, Liam? And it was probably one of the goals that probably took me most by surprise that even attempted it to begin with.
I think it was just part of the swagger of Chris Sutton telling us, don't worry, lads, Henrik's away, I've got this under control, I can do all these as well. Like him doing this, I was just like, calm down, we're going to be okay, we'll be fine, I'm still here.
So Chris Sutton's to blame for the fact Celtic didn't buy a proper striker that summer because they'd seen him do that chip and thought, he's all right, he's going to step up now. He'll be getting 50 goals next season. We don't need to bother with a striker.
We don't need Celtic board, don't need to spend. Brilliant.
I watched that green and white watch. I watched it this morning, and the commentator was talking. We brought a young boy on in that game as well, and he was getting called Mcginlay'S.
Aidan Mcginlay'S, yes. Mcginlay'S. I remember him being called Mcginlay'S early on. Yes, I remember that.
That's right.
Mcginlay'S.
I didn't know to say his name because I think that must have been around his debut sort of thing. So he played at Tynecastle a couple of weeks before for his debut. He scores on it. There's a trivia for you that I don't know why I remember, but he does in off the post at Tynecastle. And he was called. His name was mispronounced, and I don't think they get it right until the following season when he starts featuring a bit more regularly. But very interesting when you start seeing guys like Aidan Mcginlay'S beginning to break into the team as well, because there's a lot of good talent coming through. And you've got to remember, Sean Maloney was still playing quite regularly as well in the league in that season. Maybe doesn't have any big moments, but he still scores a fair number of goals, Maloney, domestically for us. And you're beginning to see the future of Celtic, and it looks fairly bright.
It does. I know. Before we move on to the final point, you'll be familiar with the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Well, here's Chris in the comments saying last year they were celebrating the draw that won us the league. And that seems to be a running theme with them, because I remember under Brendan Rodgers, when we were scalping them left, right and centre, they got a couple of snidey draws at Celtic Park. Celtic's the only team, I think, to lose 0-0 to Rangers and lose 1-1 to Rangers. Because I can remember the Clint Hill equaliser, they were elated to that one, even though the subplot to that was we were 33 points in front of the league, but at the top of the league by drawing.
And then the Stonewall penalty right after it from them as well.
And the 0-0 the next season at New Year that Murty managed to get, the one when Morelos misses a header from point blank range where Craig Gordon saves it with his leg. But they finished that game the stronger team, and again, Celtic the only team to lose 0-0. So yeah, the more things change, the more they even to this day they get a draw at Celtic Park, they're still celebrating it, Chris. They still are. But we will move on to the final point, because obviously the other big story this season was, of course, it's Henrik Larsson's last season. He gave us a year's notice. He's working his notice at Celtic, but we had to go out in style for him. So I say the headline for this one, I put piling on the agony, but going out in style. Because, yeah, obviously we want to do it for Henrik. And Henrik himself wanted to. He had a point to prove as well. He wanted to make sure that he had the strongest possible finish at Celtic, and he certainly did. Because in the league, and I mentioned this in the 2001-2002 episode we did, we went undefeated up until late April 2004 in this season. We hadn't lost a league game. And funny enough, to mirror it, Arsenal did the same thing in England this year. They went undefeated for the entire season. It would have been quite weird if Arsenal and Celtic in the same season did an undefeated league campaign, but we got to the end of April, and then Aberdeen came to town and beat us 3-2 and ruined it. They bloody ruined it. They did it in 2001-2002 as well. They were the only team to beat us. And in 2013-14, Neil Lennon was one game away from an undefeated campaign. We got till March. We'd got there, and then Aberdeen beat us at Pittodrie. So there's a few seasons.
Johnny Hayes, I think, scored a cracker that night.
He did. The game before that, we played at Tynecastle, and Fraser Foster set the record for the longest run with a clean sheet. There was a 2-0 win at Tynecastle, and in the very next game we played, we not only conceded a goal, but we lost the game as well. But yeah, Aberdeen, they like to come along and ruin these records. But domestically,
it wasn't just before you touch upon the next part, Phil. It wasn't actually just the record for that season. Celtic were on I think a 76 home game unbeaten run domestically in the league. I can't remember if it maybe included the cups as well under O'Neill. It's been going on for years. Celtic at home just didn't lose domestically. That was pretty much the crux of it. It was I'm sure it was about 76 games. There was a couple of warning signs because I remember being enthralled with this streak that Celtic were on and being completely engaged with it at the time. And I remember there was a couple of games, Dundee United, I think, nearly done us a few weeks previously. We beat them 2-1. I think Petrov ends up getting tripped to get an arc penalty in that game. As I say, it was a season where the referees obviously realised we were so far in front, they'll just give us penalties every week. It was great. It was brilliant. And then I think Hearts were actually 2-0 up against us with 10 minutes to go. And Sutton scores in the 88th. And then I think it's a gap in stoppage time. And the only reason I remember this one is because Martin O'Neill is iconic for whenever Celtic get an important goal. He's usually jumping down the touchline in typical Martin O'Neill style. Even in this one, when a gap continues the record, I think it's Aberdeen we play next year, end up ending it anyway. This gets us to about 76 home games unbeaten. Martin O'Neill's actually running it. He doesn't even know the jump. It's one of the funniest ones if you watch it back. He doesn't know what to do with himself when a gap scores this goal in stoppage time. He's just going to charge him down the touchline like Mourinho does at Old Trafford. But he's got his arms outstretched. It's one of the most hilarious celebrations from Martin O'Neill I've ever seen in my life. And then obviously Aberdeen, as you rightly say, do us like they tended to do around that time. Although I guess in fairness, we did give them a few hidings. They were probably on a few big ones from us at that time. So I guess they probably felt it was only fair that they got to take the records from us. And to be fair, if it was going to be anyone, I'd probably rather it was Aberdeen than certain other clubs anyway.
Yeah. Definitely, funny enough, we were calling you from Poy saying they ruined the long home unbeaten run that Rodgers had as well. That's right. The first home domestic game that Brendan Rodgers lost was at the end of the 17-18 season. Aberdeen beat us 1-0 on the last day, which conveniently allowed them to finish second ahead of Rangers. Look into that however you wish. But Aberdeen, man, absolutely fallen side. But yeah, we've had a good season, no few fantasy. Probably because what Arsenal are doing down south and we're exposed to that, we see it mirroring it, and we're like, we're seeing they're going undefeated and we're in the same position. Two teams could do it at the same time, but no, it wasn't to be. And funny enough, Dunfermline beat us a couple of weeks later. The bubble was burst in terms of, so I don't think we cared too much by that point. The league was won, and Dunfermline also beat us at Celtic Park a couple of weeks later. So we've absolutely dominated it in the fixtures against Rangers. We've went out of the League Cup to Hibs, as I say, at the quarter-final stage. We lost at Easter Road, but Hibs then knocked out Rangers and then lost the final to Livingston. But domestically, we're on course now for a double because obviously we've got the Scottish Cup Final coming up against Dunfermline, who we started the season with. And there was a bit of bad blood in there between Celtic and Dunfermline, to say the least, after how the previous season ended. But of course, Henrik Larsson's finishing up now, and it's the final league game at Celtic Park for Henrik, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And I remember watching it on telly, and you're just willing it on to happen. It's like he's got to score in his final league game here. We're playing Dundee United. And there's something quite poetic about it, because Dundee United are like the team that he came back from his leg break against. Dundee United the next season are the first game that he plays under Martin O'Neill alongside Chris Sutton up front, is it Tannadice, the first league game the next season, and his final ever league game for Celtic is going to be against Dundee United. So there seems to be some sort of like romance to it. Essentially, it's like of all the teams, it's like, well, the season 2000-2001 season's like his best season in terms of his goals, and it all started against Dundee United that season, and he's going to end here the 03-04 season. He's going to cap it off against them, but they frustrated us, and we couldn't seem to get a goal, and you just felt like, surely he's not going to score. He's going to have one of these rare occasions where he doesn't get a goal. But it was quite late in the day, the 83rd minute and the 86th minute, he scores a brace. Mark Wilson actually scores a penalty for Dundee United late on to make it 2-1, but it's not enough. But the interview at the end, Martin O'Neill comes in, puts the arm around him and stuff like that as well, and it's a phenomenal moment. But man, like Larsson was always so cool and calm, and he had that wee bit of cockiness to him, but he was bubbling away, wasn't he? He was, and to be fair, many fans in the stands were feeling it as well. It was an emotional one, wasn't it, Jonathan?
It definitely was. I remember my dad was in tears watching it, and he wasn't somebody who usually broke down into tears very often either. I was probably still, how old would I have been then? I would have been about 11 going on 12, but Larsson had always kind of been a part of Celtic throughout my time in the league watching football, and I didn't really probably fully appreciate just how big a loss he was at the time. I'm kind of thinking, what's this big fuss? I mean, I know he's a great player for Celtic. I'm naively still thinking as an 11-year-old boy, these players probably come along all the time, and you don't really appreciate it when you kind of always watch them, that you just almost naively expect Celtic to go out and replace them with somebody else who's going to be just as good. But when you look back on it now, you're like, wow, that was such a special moment, and you can totally see what the hype was around it. And as you rightly say, Larsson was not somebody who really ever showed much emotion at all post-match, and he could barely do the post-match interview. And the fact, I think, he comes off to do the post-match interview, then he actually goes back out onto the pitch for a final ovation, and not a single soul has left. Such was the greatness of the man, that they were all wanting to pay their final sort of salute to him before he rode off into the sunset. And what Larsson achieved over those 7 years was so special, and I don't think you could ever say anybody at Celtic has ever came close to that since he's gone, have they, Liam, in terms of that sort of impact, in terms of having such an emotional resonance with the fans?
Honestly, I never cried at my wedding. I never cried when my son was born. I never cried when my mum or dad died. I've only ever cried twice for two things that were outside the family, and that was David Bowie dying and Henrik Larsson leaving Celtic. I cried. I cried that day. I was like, fuck, I'm nearly greeting the new thing there, But it was brilliant. For me, I was in my early 40s at the time. So I was a young guy. I'd seen great Celtic players before. I remember seeing Dalglish. I remember Jimmy Johnson, as a Wayne. Larsson was something special because we saw him as this young guy that just matured in front of us. Not just matured, evolved into one of the best players on the planet. We had a guy that played for Celtic that every single team in the world would have wanted him. And they did want him. Man United wanted him. And the fact as well, he was leaving us, and he wasn't doing it in a way where, I'm going to go and end up in a MLS or something daft like that. He went to Barcelona. Barcelona was a good side, and that even helped it. It didn't make it easier, but it was good to know that he was going a place where they would appreciate a Henrik Larsson the same way that we did, and they did. And not only did the fans, I think the players that played with Barcelona also appreciated Henrik Larsson. And when he left, it was like, was that a family member moving to Canada or Australia or something? It was just wishing them all the best and all the love and all that, but you still wish they were still here, Oh, God, massive love for that guy. It was just brilliant. And it was a great way for him to bow out and go, and to see him being, so stoic and so Swedish, and, to actually break down and start crying there as well. You could see what we meant to him as well.
And Paddy Laverty's come in to completely change the tone and says, I cried when Shane Duffy left. I cried too. I cried tears of joy when Shane Duffy left. If we'd all known what was coming, we all would have cried when Shane Duffy joined at that rate. Jesus. But yeah, no, you're totally right. Liam, a very touching word there, and it's true. It was a hard moment to take, and because he was just such a cut above, and you knew it. And for all the people down south that would just go, he only does it up in Scotland, it's like, no, you don't understand. You don't see what we see every week. This guy, he can do it at the top table, and he did. He went to Barcelona and won La Liga twice and won the Champions League, and it's well known that he is the guy that Barcelona talk about in the 2006 final as the one that changed the game against Arsenal. They were getting nothing was going their way. Arsenal were defending so well with 10 men, and then Henrik Larsson comes on and sets up the 2 goals. He found those little pockets of space that nobody was having any luck finding, and it's like, the guy was a world-class talent, and there will never, definitely not in our lifetime, I would think, another striker that level at Celtic. Again, he is one of a kind.
I think the interesting thing there as well, Phil, is not only you would not see somebody of that quality, but even if you did, the sort of love-in Larsson had with the fans went both ways. Like, Larsson loved the football club just as much as the fans loved watching him play. And, that just wouldn't happen with a modern day player anymore, because they wouldn't hang around for 7 years. They'd be off after a year or two. See you later, Celtic. There's far more money to be made playing my football elsewhere. And you just wouldn't get that sort of loyalty, if a Manchester United or whoever it might well be, if he's a top player comes calling, he's going to end up going. And I just don't think you're going to see something like that happen ever again at Celtic if they got a player like that. I think even if it was somebody who was, homegrown, because I think we've even seen it with Tierney in recent times. Not that I'm saying he was as loved as Larsson was by the fans, but there was certainly a lot of love for Tierney, and a lot of love was given back. Even he still moved on quite happily when Arsenal came in and put their bid in. So, when it comes to somebody like Henrik Larsson, it was so nice to see that he actually ended up getting his moment in Europe, because I think every Celtic fan wanted Barcelona to win that final for Larsson. Interesting one, though. I think he would have probably traded in his Champions League, such was his love for Celtic, for winning the UEFA Cup in 2003. I actually think he would, and I think he's probably the only player that would ever do that, that played for Celtic Football Club.
He said in interviews since then he can't go back and watch the UEFA Cup final, and that is the one regret in his career, the one blight in his copybook that he just wishes was different. So you're right, he probably would trade it all just for that, because he got it, he bought into the club, he understood what it was all about, and man, what a guy, what a player. But as it turns out, there was one final little bit of business to do this season. There was one final trophy on the table. And this is like a bit of a weird one, because obviously, and you've heard Russell say this many times, we'll see Celtic win loads of Scottish Cups and League Cups in our lifetime, right? The domestic cups, they are what they are. They're a wee bit of like extra on top of the league if you can pick one up. But this Scottish Cup final, there's something different about this one. This is like a weird instance where, in my mind, it feels like this Scottish Cup was as important as winning the league that season. People talk about the centenary season, which is a bit before my time. I was born in '85, so I was too young for the centenary season. But people talk about the Scottish Cup final against Dundee United, winning it the way they did and completing the double that year, and how important that was to do it. And for Larsson leaving, it just felt like we've got to win this. He has to go out by winning the Scottish Cup, completing a double. Nice sunny day, May sunshine. It just seemed like the script was written for it to happen, and oh boy, it certainly did. And yeah, it's one of these ones when I look back at all the Scottish Cup wins that I've seen in my lifetime, where I just feel like this one's like probably my favourite one. This one's up there because it's just a special moment. Everything around it being the Henrik Larsson final, it just felt amazing. And although it didn't quite go according to plan in the first half, because Dunfermline do take the lead, Andreas Skeller heads them in front just before half-time with a looping header. I think David Marshall's in goal for it. I think David Marshall played in the final.
He was fouled.
Yeah,
that's one of those ones people forget.
Waiting for it to drop out the sky, and he does definitely. There's a bit of a VAR would have ruled that one out, definitely. But Andrew Skeller
he gets punched by a Dunfermline player. 100%.
Patrick McLaughlin saying that keeper was fouled. So the only one, Jonathan, that's fighting that. But early in the second half, it's Dunfermline have got another corner, but Celtic clear it, and it's a long ball at the park. And again, this is just classic Larsson. He's obviously running, trying to judge when it's going to drop down. He's got one defender, a guy named Lamont, running alongside him, and he just judges it perfectly. Takes one touch, which completely wrong foots the defender, and then brushes him aside, the point where LeBron actually falls over, and he does that classic Henrik Larsson thing where he sort of opens his body up and just bends it round the keeper, just low and round the keeper into the far corner. And freakishly enough, when we were hoping that Celtic might sign Jordan Larsson, and there was montages going around on YouTube. Now, you always do that thing where you'll watch a player on YouTube. There's a few goals that Jordan Larsson scored for Spartak Moscow where he does the exact same move, and it is freakish how accurate it is to his dad, except he does it with his left foot, his dad does it with his right foot. It's mental, but it's a classic Larsson trait. It must be much fun in the family, the way he just opens up the body, keeper buys it, and he just bends it round him into the net. And then the second goal, again, it's that defender LeBron. It's he just absolutely goes for him because he's comes too tight to him. Larsson turns on the ball and just it's his left foot this time and just fires it into the far corner. Again, so that boy, that Dunfermline defender just wasn't having the best of days against Henrik. But there you go. He's turned the game around, put his 2-1 up. And then, of course, to wrap it up, Stilian Petrov blasts one in with about 5 minutes to go where he gets a bit of space on the edge of the 18-yard box and just does what Petrov does best, just pile drives it into the net to make sure there is no doubt and Celtic will finish the season with a double. Henrik Larsson gets his big fairy tale ending of winning the double, the Henrik Larsson final. But yeah, it's like I said, Jonathan, see that Scottish Cup final. Do you have a similar mindset to me about that one? Like that one is like right up there. Is like that was honestly as important as winning the league that season because of who it was for.
It was huge. It was huge. You kind of understood the importance of it. That was just you couldn't imagine losing that. And the last memory of Larsson in a competitive game was walking up to get a runners-up medal in the Scottish Cup. It wouldn't have sat right with anyone. I remember the final pretty well. I think my brother actually had a ticket for it. I think his girlfriend at the time was able to source him a ticket, so I think he was at Hampden for that game. But I remember we went 1-0 down and you were thinking, is this going to be a Celtic day where they end up just not doing what was supposed to happen? But in some ways, it's almost worked out perfectly because if there was ever a more fitting way for Larsson to sign off, it was going to be digging Celtic out of a hole like he did so many times over his 7 years at the club. And once he gets them back on level terms, you just know he's going to score the winner. You know he's going to score the winner. Petrov, I think, is the one who ends up wrapping it all up for us. But Dunfermline contributed to that. It was a very good final. In fairness, and as you rightly say, they actually had the corner to try and go 2-0 up that we break away from and score. And Dunfermline did bring a lot to the table in that game. And as you mentioned as well, they'd actually beaten us at Celtic Park in the Scottish Cup rehearsal just a few weeks before. So we weren't playing mugs. Dunfermline were a pretty good team back then, Liam. Obviously, from your perspective, watching that one over in Canada, is that ranked quite highly as one of your favourite Scottish Cup finals?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was absolutely rammed. It was packed where we were watching that game, and it was people were coming out just to see Larsson's last game with Celtic as well. And because of all that, I think that inflated all the emotions around it as well. And going behind, and as you said, like coming back and again, his family on the pitch at the end as well. And it was just a fitting tribute to a guy that just gave us so much love and so much his career that we were able to give back to him. And you're right. I mean, him standing up there with a runners-up medal, that would be like a shite Eden to
I know.
The best film you've ever seen with I would have been Game of Thrones, disaster. But no, it was the right ending. It was the right ending to see him lifting it, and that's where he goes. He goes out a winner, and we were winners for having him. I absolutely loved that season. Like I said, I really enjoyed the season before, but this one just sort of, it just rebalanced everything back to the natural order, the way the world should be. They're struggling, they're back to clogging and, and rifling through the garbage bin of deteriorating European players and cloggers for the, Scottish leagues and all that. And then, and at that point we were losing our best player. But I thought we did something that was un-Celtic. We brought through a lot of players for the youth. And I remember, even though Larsson was leaving, not knowing what was ready to come ahead of us, but the players that showed up and the players that got a chance that year all looked promising, and they all looked like, okay, we've got something good going on here now. And I thought it would just continue, you know.
Aye. Oh,
It did feel like it would. It did feel like it would. It definitely felt like there was enough going on. Interestingly, about the cup final, I don't actually remember that being quite as emotional. I mean, certainly the game at Celtic Park had lots of emotion attached to it. But I think Larsson doesn't get emotional at all in the cup final. He's not bothered in terms of like that. He's kind of felt he's already said his goodbyes at Celtic Park, so he's a lot more cool after the game. I remember he does interviews and he's absolutely fine with it. I think perhaps in the stand it's a bit more emotional, but from my memory, I don't remember that being overly emotional, even from like the likes of my dad and my brother, who were older and were able to appreciate just how good Henrik was and how lucky we were to have a player like him. But for the two of you guys, did you kind of feel that was quite an emotional day as well? Was that as high up there as Celtic Park?
Strangely, I'm the exact same as you. It's a weird one. I don't know if it is because it's neutral ground, or maybe because he did feel that he'd said his goodbyes, essentially. You know, Celtic Park was his home. Hampden was just the place we play for cup finals and semi-finals. But yeah, you would have thought there would have been some emotion there, because that really was his last competitive game. And he was going out with winning a trophy. And I did find it quite a nice wee touch that Jackie McNamara, who was captain that day, because I think Paul Lambert's kind of phased in and out of the team because he joins Livingston the next season, I think. But Jackie McNamara was wearing the armband that day, and him and Henrik go up together to lift the cup, like a handle each, which I thought was quite a nice wee fitting sort of end to the celebrations. You know, let him lift the trophy with you. I thought that was quite a nice touch. But yeah, there wasn't that sort of like everyone in the Celtic end was all crying their eyes out. It was just joy and happiness, really. It was a bit strange, compared to what we'd seen just like a week before at Celtic Park. Really odd.
I think that's what you're seeing. Is you're seeing a player that's leaving with the best wishes and positive vibes to everybody. And I think that it was a fair exchange. He told us exactly what he was going to do. He stayed for as long as he possibly could. Told us a year before he was leaving, and then didn't put down tools or anything. Still gave us an absolutely phenomenal year. And what more can you?
40 goals.
41 goals, for his final season in all competitions. Insane. But, you know, as you say, gave us a year's notice. That wraps up the 2003-2004 season for us. We've done all right. That's 2 hours and 37 minutes. We've done pretty well today. But yeah, guys, I say they've had a year to prepare for them. So I'm sure the Celtic board has got an absolutely amazing shortlist prepared for the summer. All the potential targets that we can bring in to replace Henrik Larsson. Surely they can't get that wrong. You know, a whole year to prepare for it. But anyway, we'll deal with that next week, because unfortunately,
good luck with that.
Talk about that season. Yes, Jonathan probably won't be joining us in that one. Yes, it's not one that I'm looking forward to talking about. But as I did say when I began doing the Celtic years part of Bustalgia, I said I'm going to talk about seasons where it didn't quite go our way, and oh boy, next season it really doesn't go our way. It's an absolute sickener. But anyway, we will now finish on the trivia, guys. Remember, there was a trivia question 2 hours and 37 minutes ago. So I will go back up to the top of my notes and we'll go back to. So the benefit of anyone that came in late on this one, tonight's one revolves around one of the greatest business partnerships in modern day football, Celtic and Southampton, because there seems to be a lot of business, so we seem to give them a lot of players. Although the question revolves around business going in both directions. Because I said in the question, this summer 2003, Stephen Craney joined an exclusive club when he moved from Celtic to Southampton. But can you name all the players who have moved between both clubs in either direction? There are 9 overall in the history of both teams.
I think I've got the old question. I've got the old guy one you put to me.
Yep.
And I think we talked about it on a previous show.
Yes.
And it was something to do with Hartson coming into Celtic and somebody had to go somewhere else.
Okay.
Was it E.O. Berkovic?
It's not, mate. Berkovic signed from West Ham and left us for Man City and even had a loan deal to Blackburn. I've seen Berkovic's name come up a few times.
I thought he went to Southampton. No.
He maybe played for Southampton in his career, but no, when he left us, he went to Manchester City. He had a loan spell away at Blackburn as well, but he joined us for West Ham, so he's not one of them.
I'll give you a few of the more recent ones that I'm fairly confident are there. Stuart Armstrong will be there.
Yep.
Fraser Foster will be there, I think. Yes. El Yunusi on loan.
Yep. El Yunusi. Yep.
Yep. I'm going to throw another one out there. I can't remember if he came from Southampton or not. Was that Jos Højlund? Did he come from Southampton?
Jos Højlund went to Southampton. He left Celtic and went there.
Went
yeah.
to Southampton.
Tony Mowbray signed him, and then Neil Lennon sold him or loaned him to Southampton. Then they made the deal permanent. So Jos Højlund is one of the stinky answers that people forget, but well done. Jos Højlund is indeed a correct answer.
That's me struggling now, though. That's me out. You're going to need to find the rest of them.
Struggling, Jonathan. I am shocked, mate.
One's an easy one. One's Virgil van Dijk.
Virgil van Dijk, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And another biggie from the previous decade.
That's it. Rudy Vata.
No. Previous decade, so the 2010s, another big one that they raided us and paid a big fee for. We flipped him pretty good. We only signed the guy for less than £1 million.
Wanyama.
Victor Wanyama went to Southampton.
I had in my head he went straight to Tottenham. I totally forgot about Southampton.
Now, the three that I left are the three that I knew would be the most difficult ones. Yep.
I've got another one. Dave Key. Or
No.
was Key Song or whatever.
No, Ki Sung-young went to Swansea.
Swansea.
We signed him from a Korean team, I believe.
He went to Sunderland, I think, at some
Played
point.
for Sunderland, aye. Maybe you see it with the red and white stripes.
Aye,
that's what I'm saying.
Aye. Patrick McLaughlin, I'm going to put you at misery. The hardest one, Patrick McLaughlin's got it. We've mentioned this guy on Bustalgia before. Ian Andrews, goalkeeper after the centenary season. The notoriety around him is he was in goal when Rangers beat us 5-1 after the centenary season. Ray Wilkins scores an absolute rasper a goal for a volley from outside the area. But Ian Andrews came in and he would have been summer of 88. Probably with the view that he would replace Paddy Bonner long term. And yeah, his first game against Rangers, we could beat 5-1, and he didn't last much longer. He was away by like 1990, but he went to Southampton, so that would have been trick on. If Johnny Logue's watching, he might have known that one because he was talking about Ian Andrews in particular in that episode we did about the early 90s because he hated Ian Andrews, hated him. So I'll put you out of misery with that one. But the other two, there's one from the mid 2000s that gets mentioned quite a lot on Bustalgia, especially when
Paul Telfer.
Yes, Paul Telfer. Because I was going to say when Russell talks about the disparity, with people going about how we can't compete with teams, he always uses poor Paul Telfer as an example. We beat Man United and Paul Telfer in the team and stuff like that. He always brings him up. He's like the prototype for demonstrating disparity. It's like, well, there you go.
That's right. Strachan brought him up from Southampton, didn't he? Because he was Southampton manager before.
In 2005. And the other one is this is from Venglos' season, right? From Venglos'. Now you might not remember this one, but this is at a time when transfer windows weren't their thing. We could bring in players during February, March, and so on. We brought in a sort of emergency loan at the tail end of that season, a centre back. He was quite rubbish in the few games he played, but he's always known for he played in that 3-0 game where Rangers beat us to win the league and Hugh Dallas got struck by the coin. There's a defender that was playing that day that was on loan from Southampton. Can you remember his name? Oh.
No. No.
That's... Liam's thinking.
Liam, it's on you, mate.
No. A few people in the comments have got it. They've mentioned them. But the answer, and again, it's Patrick McLaughlin. Patrick McLaughlin, mate, honestly, you're like a pure mastermind. Scott Marshall played at centre-backs that day. Came up for the sort of tail end of the 98-99 season. And, yeah, he was rotten anyway. But, yeah, he's the notoriety to him is he's in the starting lineup for that game that we get beat 3-0 and lose the league that day. But, yeah, Scott Marshall is the other one. The thing is, there's another one there that might actually be a right answer, but again, I'm just going by the website transfer. John Afolabi, but he actually played a first team game, so maybe that's why he's not listed on Transfer Market, because I think he only went into the B team. He's only played B team games. Afolabi, because I think he might have came from Southampton or went to Southampton. Okay, fair, that's true, but that's basically it. So yeah, Celtic and Southampton, they love a wee deal between each other, it seems, although it's more so towards Southampton. But yeah, that does wrap up the there's Alistair Jack with a good review of Scott Marshall, worst centre-back ever. And remember, we've had guys like Raphael Felipe Scheidt as well, keep that in mind. So that's quite a damning indictment of Scott Marshall. But yeah, that does wrap up the 2003-2004 season. See next week on Bustalgia, it's 4:05. Yeah, that final day of the season. Not looking forward to that. But it will also be Martin O'Neill's last season as Celtic manager. Talk about Henrik Larsson's obviously being this one. Martin O'Neill's final season. So we'll be going into all the chat around that one. So in terms of what's coming up on the bus this weekend, obviously Celtic are playing Livingston on Sunday. So there will be PMP in place for that one on Sunday afternoon. Russell will be on that one because obviously the last few games we've had a Saturday game. Russell's had to do 6:30 on a Saturday because he works then, but Sunday he'll be free, so he'll have a team together to do PMP for that one. A wee trip to Almondvale with the Tony Macaroni, not a particularly happy hunting ground for us, so hopefully, given the last time we went there, we beat them 3-1, hopefully that's another similar result on Sunday. Celtic can keep their gap at the top of the table, and I think Russell did mention something on Thursday that he might appear and do like a show on his own on Saturday night. He does that. He'll do like a guerrilla style show. He'll just appear out of nowhere.
Nobody knows if this is coming or going. We'll just have to wait and see.
Just drops a link on YouTube out of nowhere. He just drops it like he just appears. So he might do that on Saturday. If not, then I say Sunday will be PMP, and then Monday Jonathan will be back with Russell for the Monday Club. Yep. I'll come along and make your life hell in the last 10 minutes for a wee trivia question as well. Sutton Death.
Yeah, looking forward to
it. Yep. You've got momentum now, mate. You've got your first win on the board.
Momentum. So it's 2-1 now, so I'll be bringing that back to level pegging this week. So looking forward to that.
Indeed. And also Paddy Lavish reminds me that the clocks go back as well, folks, this weekend. So remember that to adjust the clocks. Don't know, Liam, what's the deal with the clocks changing over on that side of the world? Has it already happened, or a week after us? A week later.
It's mental. It's always the games I end up messing up because I've seen it was 5:30 in the morning this week. Usually it's a 4:30 game. So get your sleep in.
It's a bit better for you. A bit better for your wee extra long lie.
I like it. Nice. Long lie this weekend, so it'll be good.
I get you an extra hour in bed. But other than that, guys, yeah, we were out of here. So yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for coming on, mate. It's been a good wee trip to memory lane for this season. It's always better when it's a good season to talk about. And Liam, as always, mate, fantastic to have you on again, man. Canada's favourite Tim, Liam Greenlaw. Superb stuff, guys. Thanks everybody in the chat. And just again, a quick reminder, remember to hit the like, comment, share, subscribe, and all that other good stuff.
All that good stuff. Yeah.
Massively appreciate it. And we are out of here, guys. So I'm on the Celtic at the weekend. Come on, get it done, Celtic. Put Livingston to the sword, please.
Yeah. Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.